Hello, stream. I think Micah, or not Micah. So I saw Micah's chat. I think Josiah just started us off early. Live and fucking learn. Let's go. Thank you, Gondam and Micah in chat. Unbelievable. Josiah's putting on his contraption. I don't know what that is. It looks like some sort of wire. What's he doing over there, chat?
I'm a narc.
I don't know what. He's plugged in.
Mm-hmm. To the Matrix.
There we go. Josiah, how's it been going? Pisco.
Oh, that goddamn hissing microphone.
There it is.
No, it's not.
It is.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. It is.
It's hissing.
It's hissing like a coiled rattlesnake.
We're done. By the way, we're done with Restream.
We're done with it,
Why
huh?
Why are we done with Restream?
Because it sucks, and
Okay.
everything will be fixed, and I'll fix this too.
Listen, more power to you. I think it's convenient AF. But listen, you got to work around. It's going to make my life easier. That's all I care about.
It will.
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to.
Look, if Pisco can't figure out his mic settings, I don't know about him figuring out another streaming platform, is all I'm going to say. All right.
It's not me. It's the app.
Sure.
Blaming the tool instead of the user.
Hutch doesn't have issues. Econoboy doesn't have issues. I don't have issues. You have all kinds of issues. Not all of them germane to Restream, but they're out there.
This might be the city of New York's fault.
It probably
we haven't
is.
considered that, but you know,
let's see. Nightbot
but Josiah,
take your
how
pants
things
off.
been going?
Is this good?
No, the hiss is still there. It's fine. I mean, it's tolerable. It's not gonna,
It's intolerable.
I mean, if I can tolerate your opinions on Merrick Garland, I can tolerate this like fucking dull hiss in the background. So somebody says that Pisco's mic sounds almost as bad as Merrick Garland.
That's right.
Can someone explain lame duck? Yes, it's when a particular person or political party serves out the remainder of their term and power is going to transfer at the start of the next term. So President Biden is in his lame duck period where he's about to leave office and somebody's going to replace him. The Democrats in the Senate are in their lame duck period because after January, they will no longer hold the majority.
That's right. Someone's been elected, but they haven't taken office yet. There you go. Hutch said he would be a little bit late, so I don't know if you guys want to just start talking. Oh, he is. Okay. Drag him in then.
Fucking on top of it, man.
There we go. Hutch is the anticipation.
What's up?
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Okay, there he goes.
What's going on? Hello.
It's quiet for a long time.
No, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
You can now.
Okay.
Looks like Hutch shaved his beard recently.
Trimmed
you
it
cut
down
it all
a little
off?
bit.
Okay.
He's so fucking
Just a little
studly. That's the thing. Like, I mean,
fair enough.
When Hutch walks into a room, all 6 feet 6 inches of him, the doors just like blow open. He's got his fucking shades on. He didn't even wear shades in. They just manifest. He's got the Biden aviators.
How about now?
Oh, it's even worse.
It's worse.
Oh.
Somehow you've managed that somehow.
Oh, now I can hear it. But before that, you were just talking. I couldn't hear shit.
When I was talking, you didn't hear anything?
Amazing.
No. Now it's gone. I don't hear it. I don't hear it right now. Stop talking.
I hear hissing.
I hear
You
it.
hear it? I don't hear it. Interesting. It must be like, I don't know, like.
Does the chat hear it? That's the real question.
Your
they
voice
hear
is
it.
also only coming in through the left channel for me.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Boom.
Wait, what? That
Now-
doesn't make
okay.
any sense.
Wait,
now it's
better.
now it's better.
You can still hear the hiss.
They say you're on the wrong mic.
I'm not on the wrong mic.
You're
try now.
on the right mic now, but whatever you did last week, do that again because there's like a low hiss in the background.
Testing.
Hello.
Better.
What did you do last weekend? You turned one thing in Windows down and you turned
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so let's do the
Pisco's mic appears to have some sort of mind of its own.
Hello.
That's
very,
great.
very low.
But you're
He's down
quiet.
very low.
Okay.
I'm gonna crank him up.
No, I can crank up my own gain. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
We're getting closer, but it's still
You're a little quiet.
Okay, hold 1 second. How about now? Testing.
Great.
There you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good. You're good.
Somebody says, "Come for the political content, stay for the mic issues."
Alrighty. Sorry, guys. I think I know the secret now. For whatever reason, Restream needs me to like lower the mic volume. I don't know why that is.
Wow. Pisco's mic equals Hutch's Aquaman takes. Is that a deep cut?
Whoa. Did you guys talk about comic book movies without us?
Hutch might have. It's what I'm hearing.
It's a running gag in my chat. Let's not.
As in, you run a gag when you see Aquaman, or no? I'm just kidding.
No, I said
swimming
Aquaman
gag.
1. I said Aquaman 1 was a solid comic book film, and I may have at one point said that the climactic battle at the end of Aquaman
Was the greatest scene of all time.
in terms of scale was on the level of the Two Towers.
Wow.
I got to say, like,
Love that.
That's a hot
That's
take.
a wild take.
It's not a hot take. Watch the end of the film.
Listen,
There's like
all right, I'll
millions
watch
of
it.
little sea
When I-
creatures.
I haven't
It's
seen
Wait a
it.
minute.
epic.
When I say it's
Yeah.
a hot take, I just mean that I've not heard that particular take before. Like that is a heretofore unarticulated position. But
What
I
is it
gotta
with
say-
you and the heretofore and like
I'm
the
just gonna
very
say-
SAT word thing?
I've just got to say, as great as the ending of Aquaman is, does it really hold a candle to the end of The Rise of Skywalker?
We're not doing this again. Play the scene.
Uh,
Wait, I have some announcements. Folks,
Sure.
so for Live and Learn, we're getting some cool art. We're getting some cool graphics. It may be a thing that we're not doing Restream anymore because of but I'll have an alternative that'll work everything out. But I just want to let you know.
Says some people on the chat who shall remain
It's
nameless
not
really
it's not for
struggle.
audio stuff. It's
Yeah.
it's for your experience. It's for your immersion. We want to maximize your immersion. Like you're
This is like a
sitting in on
we
us.
want
Like
to
you're on
immerse
the Zoom call.
Yeah, we want to immerse you like baptism. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's everything. That's all my announcements.
Wait, what are we doing instead of Restream?
I'll
we
let
talk
you
about
know.
it in the-
I
Okay,
yeah, we haven't talked about it. I maybe shouldn't have talked about the internal stuff, but I'm just so excited about it. I had
Listen,
to-
this is email. Pisco is sending out an email to everybody, but we're CC'd in it.
Also, should we talk about the day? Have we decided on?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
we're-
yeah.
We're also looking at revisiting the days that we do this because apparently Wednesdays put us in direct competition with people whose audiences we're trying to poach. Destiny with your fucking anything else with Dan and all this. So we're looking at alternative days.
Did
Who
not
actually
settle? I feel like we
watches
settled on a
anything
day,
else?
right? Or did we not?
I'm sorry, Hutch.
I thought we settled on a day, or did we not?
If it's settled, I'm cool with it. I could make Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday work, just not Friday or Saturday.
we were thinking Monday.
That'll
if that
work
works
with me.
for everybody. Yeah.
so every one of you guys in the chat, just like let us know your schedules, and we'll do a when to meet, and we'll make sure it works for all of you.
We'll poll the
We'll put it
audience.
we'll put it into an algorithm and we'll optimize.
We'll have Ann Seltzer, who's currently unemployed. We'll have Ann
Yo,
Seltzer like dude.
Econoboy, it's enough past election now. I want to say, Econoboy gave me the most hopium of anyone in the entire election cycle.
Yeah, I gave
And
a lot of people hopium, and it was dashed. It was dashed on election.
don't blame
night.
you.
Dude, but in our defense though, like even God, why am I forgetting? Nate Silver even said, "This is a crazy poll, but I wouldn't want to bet against her."
True.
And so, you know,
and
like,
he's a fucking gambler by trade, right? Isn't that
Right.
like what he does?
He's a gambler.
Yeah.
Well, it's unfortunate because the polls, the polls just really didn't. My main thesis was that the polls did not really tell us great information because you'd have a poll like it'd be like the aggregate in Arizona or something. The aggregate would be like 48 to 47 and a half, and it's like, well, that's just not what the result's going to be. Like we have to basically make a guess as to where that extra 5% of the vote's going to go. And my guess was that it would tilt towards Kamala for various reasons. It just turned out to be wrong. But I don't know. I think that
Well, hang on,
elections are just
calling you out.
go on.
The Econoboy gave me the most opium for something.
but that was because of the Seltzer poll, though. That was
Same reason,
directly
yeah.
because of the Seltzer poll.
And there was all this other stuff. I mean, people keep in mind there was a lot of directional things that were proven wrong. Like people talked about the Washington primary directionally being incorrect,
True.
and Seltzer's poll was wrong, and the actual polls themselves didn't really tell us very useful information. And so it was, you just had to kind of have a instinctual vibe, and there's not really that many people that I can think of who. There's not that many people. I can think of one person in my orbit who wanted Kamala to win, but predicted that Trump would win. There just doesn't seem to be that many people who actually had like the people who predicted Trump would win. It's like all Trump supporters, and it's like, well, I don't know if that's actually good analysis or if it's just they want their guy to win.
I got to give a shout out
Yeah.
a shout out to Progress Lib's founder Maya Luna.
That's who I was talking about.
Yeah. Oh, so she predicted that that Trump would win. So Prophet Maya, well done. Although you gave us the bad news.
At the end of the day, though, like if you get a prediction wrong, you're an idiot. If you get a prediction right, you're a genius. And you change hats each election, and nobody knew. Like there were compelling arguments on both sides. So I mean, I'm not going to beat myself up too much for.
No, I mean,
I didn't think she would win in a blowout. Like I was fully convinced that the polls were probably like indicating that it was going to be a close race, but.
Oh wait! Before we leave this topic, I just want to say the other person who gave me the most hopium, the second most hopium, who I've been saying is sounding more and more based, is Kyle Kalinske. He released 3 models where he had an utter blowout,
Florida and
Blexus, and he's like, even if the polls are demonstrably and categorically wrong in favor of Kamala, she still nabs it by 270.
Yeah, I think Emma Vigeland had. She had my prediction plus Kamala winning Iowa.
No,
she was another one that it was like extremely optimistic. Well, I don't know. I think as well. I don't know. It's inherently, it's like, how bad is it to just be optimistic? I was so cynical after 2016.
I love it.
I was very cynical after 20.
But you love cynicism or you love optimism?
No, I love Econoboy's attitude. I think that.
I agree. Somebody needs to be the Pollyanna here, and.
I was gonna say I was so cynical because of 2016, and I had very little hopes in 2020, and I was like, I don't know, man. Let's just be optimistic this election. I feel like things look good for us, and that's just kind of what I went with. Maybe I'll feel differently in 2024. I mean, I think that what the kind of like my reevaluated priors from this election are that if the economy's stupid is still just a really strong, a very, very strong thing to go.
Weather, yeah.
Like as a fundamentals based forecast to make. And it always has been. I think that in our generation, we just didn't have experience with elections and high inflation. That hasn't happened in like 40 years. So,
you can have outliers like 2022, but Roe was very, very fresh at the time. And so
there's a reason I'm sorry, go ahead. No, sorry, go ahead.
You can explain. So even though 2022 was like the height of inflation, Democrats actually had kind of a historically good midterm performance, but the Roe decision came back. It came in like June or July, and then the election was 5 months later.
And education polarization turned out to be much more real than we thought it was. And 2022 was a sign of that, where educated people are just seemingly today just so overwhelmingly more likely to vote for Democrats.
If you did the homework, you voted for Kamala. That was a pattern.
If you're a fucking nerd and you studied and paid attention to facts, and
if you're a cool kid,
Well, I feel like another prior.
You vote.
I feel like another prior you should reevaluate is ground game versus digital. And they talked about it in the New York Times. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was a really interesting kind of panel that they did. There was a New York Times
Deal book.
What's it called? Deal book. Yeah. And it had like Van Jones, Kellyanne Conway.
I finally
McCarthy,
watched all that because I'd been hunting for that for days, and it's an unlisted link, and somebody in DGG sent it to me. Sarah Longwell, man, she was like fighting them off left, right, and center. She was going after Kellyanne Conway, Kevin McCarthy, Jason Miller. Yeah. And by the way, if you see that panel, I don't know about you, Hutch, but that panel drove me nuts because there's a lot of valid criticisms to make of the Democrats, but watching I got the vibe that like Jonathan Karl and Major Garrett and all these even Van Jones were like trying to show off their objective bona fides by just slugging the shit out of Democrats nonstop. And like even on issues that really pissed me off, on like Trump not threatening to weaponize the DOJ, they would both sides this issue and really downplay the threats. The whole thing was immensely triggering.
I love conversations like that where it's like, yes, Mr. Conservative, you're right. The Democrats are complete dog shit, but here's the reason why I'm one of the good liberals.
Right? No, exactly. That's genuinely what it felt like when I heard Van Jones say, I agree with Kellyanne on multiple things, or it was so frustrating, and it was further proof that even the so-called liberal media is really it's really predisposed to grading Republicans on a curve and just using any excuse imaginable to shit on Democrats. Like, no mention of the fact that there was an incumbency global sentiment, right? That this was not an outlier performance. This was actually pretty consistent with what we've been seeing in elections across Western democracies, regardless of political affiliation. And actually, if you look at the analysis, Kamala Harris actually outperformed most other quote unquote incumbents in these elections.
And House Democrats.
Yeah, no, exactly. We actually gained a seat. Like, no mention of that whatsoever. Kevin McCarthy was allowed to run roughshod on this idea that, this was actually a blowout, a landslide. People are like, so there was so much movement in counties, even blue counties across the country. And yes, that is important to note. But at the end of the day, counties don't vote. People vote. And when you look at it, still a 1.5% popular vote swing. That is not a fucking blowout. And if that is a blowout, then what Biden did to Trump in 2020 was a goddamn avalanche. And so just to me, it's like we can be introspective and we can and should criticize the Democratic Party when we see, okay, in hindsight, looking at the data, this was a mistake. You should have done this instead. There should be that responsible postmortem. But to pretend that the Democrats just totally shit the bed, it was an absolute blowout and Trump was perfect. And by the way, when he threatened,
we were too woke.
It's so frustrating. It really is. But you all should check that out.
We also have to we're in this post-election period where, the American people spoke and they decided that January 6th was not enough to disqualify him. And that's the decision that they made. We all have to live with that decision. But we're sort of in this period where we have to kind of pretend like it isn't insane that he tried to steal an election and then just got away with it and got reelected.
Hutch, even on
and so that's like the Sarah person. What's her Longwell? Is that her? Longwell, so she was kind of fulfilling that role of like bringing it back to that, like, hey, this happened. And every time she did on the panel, McCarthy had his smug smile and Jason Miller and Kellyanne Conway. She was just insufferable. Every time Sarah opened her mouth, Kellyanne reverted to like a high school girl.
McCarthy's like the biggest scumbag.
Before you touch on that, because that's his own separate topic, I just want to close the loop on this. So Hutch saying that, mentioning January 6th, that was one of the biggest frustrating moments. Major Garrett, of all people, which is he CBS, ABC? He's like one of the major news.
Major Garrett, who the hell?
That is his actual name.
CBS chief correspondent, I think for DC.
Is this South Park guy? That's what his Twitter is. Twitter handle.
Mr. Garrett. No, it's Major Garrett, and his name is Major.
No, look at this, bro. Hang on. Look at his fucking his thing, real quick.
All right. Well, while you're sending that link, so this is a guy who's supposed to be like hard news, right? He's not on Fox. He's not on MSNBC. He's not even on CNN. He's supposed to be a straight no nonsense guy. Oh yeah, that is him. I didn't realize. Yeah, he actually has a South Park icon or profile picture. But the frustrating thing about this was they mentioned January 6th, and Pisco, you'd have blown a fucking gasket if you heard this. He says something to the effect of, listen, when it comes to Donald Trump's criminality, or when it comes to the lawsuits against him, this was tried in the court of public opinion, and the people made it clear that he basically was downplaying the legal implications of Donald Trump. He's like, basically, the people decided this doesn't matter. They made their choice that Trump's sins are irrelevant. Like, he was seriously downplaying just the objective significance of these things.
Yeah, that's the key really term there, right? So the key term there is objective.
Truth, though. I feel like that's the truth, though. Like, that didn't bother me because he's right.
No, he's right with respect to the political situation, the election, and what Americans value. But if the question is he culpable, then he could have I'll go up against any majority at any time and tell the truth. And that's what was going on. Like, whether or not the public is willing to act on it, or whether the public has the right opinion, it's up to us to be like, well, you're wrong. And
how useful is that going to be in the short term, though?
I don't know about.
I feel like it's kind of like a bad look for us to harp on that, which is kind of it makes me feel crazy. But
I'm not disagreeing with you.
If we do the January 6th, I'm not normie public are not going to tune into that.
I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of election strategy. I have no disagreement there. But if the question is he a criminal, whatever, did this happen the way we say it, then I'm never going to give ground on that. But I agree with you that we should change our messaging in terms of what we focus on.
Yeah, no, and I just want to be clear. I think if the point were simply the American people decided that Trump's criminality is irrelevant, even if he phrased it like that, I would be okay with it. But he seemed to be suggesting that basically Trump didn't do anything wrong because he was reelected. That was the implication I got.
I didn't get that
response.
from what he said personally, but
I mean, there are some Republicans where it seems like the vibe is like, oh, well, now this is a dead issue because the American people have spoken, and it's like, well, no, like he still broke the law, and I don't think that, I don't think that, people who are in charge of ensuring justice and enforcing justice in our society should just like forget about this as an issue. But to you, Hutch and Pisco's point, I think that this is compatible with the idea that that's not the job of clearly that's not the job of campaigners. That Democrats running for re-election, depending on the person you're running against, obviously, but it just, especially in 2028 when Trump's not even going to be on the ballot, it's just not clear that that's an issue that you should really talk about that much on the campaign trail. It doesn't seem to resonate with a lot of people very, very deeply. To the extent that it does resonate with people, those people are already voting for Democrats. And throughout, the history of democratic experiments, there's just a lot of examples of criminals who get reelected, right? I mean, I think it was Perón. Yeah, I mean, Perón in Argentina, he was in charge of a military coup and a junta, and he ends up getting reelected as president several years later. The president of the Philippines right now, his family is a corrupt criminal family, and people
is it
thought
Duarte or something?
No,
like
Duterte.
He's
Duterte.
Yeah, it's Bong Bong now.
Oh.
But I think that Trump is just people in what they feel to be desperate circumstances or in like fed up circumstances, just they've just never seemed to care that much about people's criminal histories. Now, don't get me wrong, if it's like something very biting, I think people will care about it. But if it's like just this sort of like, corruption and this, disillusion of the democratic processes, unfortunately, people just historically just haven't cared that much about that.
Yeah,
So.
messaging wise, like I feel like we should definitely focus on what's in front of us during the Trump era. Like I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about January 6th anymore. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about E. Jean Carroll case. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the felonies. It's just because this, in many ways, this election just rendered those criticisms kind of moot right now. And so,
do you think they would have been more relevant in a different context? And what I mean by that is if we knew all of these things, let's say in 2016 or in 2020, when we weren't dealing with, post-COVID inflation and price hikes, and this is a genuine question because I'm not sure, would all this stuff matter? Or do you think it's because it's Trump?
So.
It doesn't matter.
I think the inflation issue was obviously just such a profoundly impactful issue this election. And I think it made the other stuff more salient. And I mean, people were upset about the border, but I think it made the border more salient because it just opened them up to criticism. It made the Afghanistan withdrawal more salient. So when people's economic circumstances are impacted to the extent that they were negatively in 2022 and 2023, it just makes all those other criticisms much more easier to make. If we didn't have inflation, I mean, who knows? Maybe we would see, maybe Biden would have stayed on the ticket or something. I have no idea, but yeah.
It's also not clear to me that the, what was I going to say? It's also not clear to me that the salience of these issues, or like if we didn't have inflation in general, I think to Hutch's point, like people probably would have cared about other things a little bit more. But because we had inflation, it's not clear to me that in bad economic circumstances or like perceived bad economic circumstances, there's really a great way to counter message on that. Like, I just don't, because you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You can't just say, oh yeah, your concerns aren't real. That doesn't exist. The Will Stansel strategy, for those unfamiliar on Twitter, he tried
vibe
this,
session. Yeah.
That just messaging just like doesn't seem to work. And it's like, okay, well, then you can try and counter message and say, well, actually, like the things that we did made things so good. But it seems like people in general just have an extremely hard time internalizing counterfactuals, right? Like all else equal is just not a statement that is intuitive to 90% of people. Like you can say, like with Obamacare, this happened with Obamacare. What Democrats tried to say is, yes, your premiums went up after Obamacare was enacted, but they would have gone up even more if it wasn't for Obamacare. And it's like, well, that's probably true. But that just doesn't work. It doesn't.
Well,
seem
it
like
doesn't.
that
It doesn't.
works.
It doesn't work for us. So I am actually, and listen, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not ready to totally let go of this idea that Democratic messaging could have had potentially an outcome determinative effect on the election, because I've just seen too many examples. It seems like with Donald Trump just blatantly lied to the American people, and Republicans do it, and we actually see polling reflect it. So, like, one of the big ones for me in 2023 was how much of the American people believe that Joe Biden was corrupt based on the Hunter Biden investigations going on in Congress. Now, anyone paying attention would recognize that there is no established link. Like, those, to people who paid attention, those hearings and that effort was just one public disaster after another. James Comer was being reamed on Newsmax and Fox News by Maria Bartiromo and the other guy from Newsmax, whose name escapes me at the moment. But like, they were like, so where's your smoking gun? Well, you know, we're still working. We're still diligent. Joe Biden and the Biden crime family. And he would just like do this fucking thing. But if you look at the polls, it was close to a 50-50 split about the people who believe that. And actually, in some polls, based on the question, a majority of Americans thought that there was some sort of inappropriate tie between Biden and Hunter Biden's family connection. So my point is,
I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just real quick, I was just going to say, I am not convinced that you cannot influence. I'm not convinced that you can't influence people's, even mass groups' perceptions on things, because we see Trump do it all the time. I do think that if Trump repeatedly said, and Fox News said, the sky is orange, you would have 40% of the American people at least believing it. I'm sorry. I do think that there's an enormous influential effect of media and Democrats' message discipline, or at least political parties' message discipline. Sorry, Hutch, go ahead.
It's just, no. It's just difficult because the Republican Party right now are a bunch of arsonists, and I think the public was primed to believe that there was this corrupt link between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, because broadly Americans have lost faith in the Congress. They've lost faith in institutions, and they just assume that there's just this outright corruption at every level of the government, the FBI, the executive, the Congress, the courts. And so that's a result of over a decade now of like consistent messaging from Republicans that, and to a certain extent, some populists on the left, right? That the whole system is just utterly corrupt and it needs to be torn down and remade in some new image. And so I felt like they had an advantage there. Like, even though, as you said, the hearings that Comer was doing was just a fucking clown show. When you actually watched it, it was ridiculous. But it didn't matter, like, because people were just ready to believe obviously that Joe Biden was involved, in corrupt business dealings with his son.
I'll be honest with you, like my initial, gut reaction is, I think Democrats should absolutely try to crib the Republican strategy moving forward. It's one thing Van Jones said, which was true in this Deal Book Summit, which is that right now Republicans own it. And I think that that's the attitude that Democrats need to have. I think if whatever bad happens in the United States starting on January 20th at 12:01 p.m., I think Democrats should ruthlessly say it's Donald Trump's fault. If you have a loved one dying of cancer after January 20th, it is literally because of Donald Trump. And I think you should just vilify him for all fucking
desire-based, blatantly lie.
He's made a lot of really outlandish promises. And so
can you disprove? Can you disprove, Pisco, that my loved one isn't dying?
I guess I can't disprove
exactly.
He ran on world peace. He ran on halving your energy bill. Am I saying that right? Halving your energy bill.
Having it.
He ran on lowering grocery prices.
Yes.
He ran on lowering gas prices. And so every day that these things don't happen, we should be just
every fucking day,
attack, right?
every goddamn day. I'm sorry. And when they come back and say, well, when he said he could end the war in 24 hours, take him seriously, but not literally. Be like, no, fuck that. He said it. He made a promise to the American people. And that is sorry, I understand I'm on the soapbox, but I've just got to get this off my chest. Biden himself, he just proved us right. He actually gave remarks at I think it was Bloomberg, no, it was a Brookings Institute, I think it was. And he goes, one thing I learned from Donald Trump is put your name on the checks. 100%. Democrats, it should be fucking letterhead. The morally superior, infinitely objectively better in all ways Democratic Party with no help to the Republican Party is providing for you and literally everything.
Yeah, Josiah's Joker moment is writing Joe Biden's name on a check.
I mean,
that's one thing, right? That's one thing. Like, I actually don't love the whole, like, we need to start playing dirty like the Republicans, because I just don't think that the party will be sustainable in the long run if we do nothing but just fire hose lies 24/7. Like, Josiah, I don't know if you're being 100% honest here, but
putting
little
the names
stuff
on the checks. No, I am
little stuff like,
100%.
I mean, more, no, the name on the check is something different though. Like,
Yeah.
Democrats just need to be way savvier about media and public perception, and they can't rely on this notion that them being these firm institutionalists with all this respect for norms is going to be enough to overcome the propaganda that's out there right now. It's just clearly not the case.
What you and Pisco mean, because I'm curious, because I would argue that when Trump says, okay, here's the most maximally honest response a Democrat could give when Donald Trump says he could end the war in 24 hours. That's not true. But you know what? I can't really hold President Trump to that because, of course, I know it's not possible to end the war in 24 hours. And when he doesn't cut grocery prices in half, yes, he lied about it, but I really can't blame him for that because I know that the president can't snap his fingers and cut grocery prices in half. So we have to be very clear about what we consider an honest response from the Democrats, because if we're going maximally honest, there are really no vectors by which to attack Trump based on his ludicrous promise.
I think Josiah is based. I'm extracting very...
Wait a minute. Can a convoy, what do you mean? You don't think it's honest or dishonest? I'm sorry, what do you mean?
It's not dishonest.
That's not dishonest because promises made and promises not kept is not a dishonest thing to say. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I said I'm refreshing like the grocery price CPI index, because Trump and the Republicans have stubbornly adhered to the idea that like, no, like the government is responsible. You know, you take the lever that says grocery prices and you can just move that up and down. And it's like, okay, well, motherfucker, if that's the standard that you want to establish for the government that you're now in charge of, hell yeah, I'm going to run an ad in 4 years that says grocery prices are 15% points higher. Like, you said you're responsible for that and you fucking failed. Were you lying or were you stupid?
But I'm a Fox News host and I'm talking to Congressman Econoboy, and I would say, okay, Congressman Econoboy, are you saying that the president can snap his fingers and cut grocery prices in half?
Oh, you're asking me? Let's do a little role play.
Yeah, let's do some role play.
I'm saying that Donald Trump said he could do that. And so
I understand,
he was lying or he was stupid.
I understand, Congressman, but Donald Trump says a lot of things. The American people have decided that they don't take Donald Trump literally in all circumstances. So I'm asking you, do you think that the president of the United States can snap his fingers and change gas prices and grocery prices?
Well, look, Donald Trump sold that message to the American people. And so if we want to come out and say, oh, no, Donald Trump just lies about every single thing he says, that's not what Republicans were saying on the campaign trail. They weren't saying, oh, yeah, we can't really take Trump seriously on 90% of the shit that he says. No.
Again, this is something that I'm sorry that you and your TDS party fall into every time you deal with Donald Trump. And 2 out of 3 elections you've lost, which is that Donald Trump says something that a lot of people consider off the cuff. They love the cut of his jib. They like, how he shoots from the hip. And you all want to parse every single thing and hold him to literally every single thing, which is not the standard that the American people hold him to. And what I'm saying is this is what we're going to hear. And so the maximally honest approach would be Congressman Econoboy saying, you're right, I actually don't think the president can do these things. And so I'm sorry. I think there has to be politicking involved. I don't think we have to be I don't think we have to be generous with the benefit of the doubt. I don't think it's dishonest to play by the Republican standard, which is they own it. They own it. And when on 2 days after inauguration, when grocery prices are still as high as they were before or higher still, blame it on Trump. Now, an honest, I suppose, by Econoboy's definition of honest, we couldn't do that because it's really not Trump's fault, right?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Again, what I'm saying is that you do play by their playbook and you say, okay, you said you could do this, but it's not happening, right? And so you have to bite that bullet at some point if you're a Republican in the next 4 years. Now, to be fair, there might be, I guess you never really know. Maybe Donald Trump just is able to speak things and, capacities of the economy into the universe. Like maybe all of a sudden tariffs do just work because Donald Trump says that they do. I wouldn't put it past that. But, I don't think that that's probably likely. I think what's probably likely is that we either have, I don't know, some sort of exogenous recession, just like what's happens under other presidencies, or we have some sort of just like piddling along economy that, tends to sort of marginally improve or improve over time. And at the end of the day, if you're going to run a campaign on price levels and not actually cause those price levels to go down without a huge recession, well, then, yeah, I think that you deserve all the blame in the world. You can't just overpromise things and underdeliver in that regard. And presidents since time immemorial have been criticized for this. I mean, Obama was criticized when he didn't fix the healthcare system in totality. Obviously, Biden was criticized when he didn't fix the economy in totality. And Trump was criticized when he was president. And he was completely fucking insane. And although the economy hummed along, people obviously had a really, really large problem with his general government. I mean, even before COVID, he was very unpopular, even before COVID, right? Like that would have been a tough re-election battle. I happen to think it's probably the case he wins re-election if COVID doesn't happen. Obviously, we don't know that to be the case. I mean, it's hard to say. But even in that context, he ends up taking historic losses in the midterms. Like, that's just a decent bellwether of like, hey, people really didn't like what Trump did because Trump overpromised and underdelivered. And so I think that part of the messaging strategy for the next 4 years is just let things play out how they will, allow Trump to do the promises he says he's going to do, which are pretty much entirely bad things. You know, the tariffs, the mass deportations, the hollowing out of law enforcement institutions, the appointing of judges that are completely fucking insane. People aren't going to like that inherently. And then let him not basically meet any of his economic promises with actual policy.
Well,
yeah. And then
one promise that he will keep will be more tax cuts. I feel like we need to, because they can do that through reconciliation.
Yeah,
they'll have the votes to do that. One thing I think we should push people to do is like to share like how much their paycheck actually went up. I feel like we weren't super aggressive about that. The tax cuts the first time around in 2017, I think for middle income earners resulted in like $900 extra a year. It was nothing. Like it was such a small, tiny amount. People barely noticed it on their paychecks. And so,
well, I think that even when, again, like the tax cut gets passed in late 2017, he takes a bath in the following midterm. Like that's clearly something that wasn't particularly popular. And that's because, again, like Hutch said, I mean, that messaging was really effective. Hey, 80% of the benefits of this tax cut goes to the top 1%. Just look at the numbers. If you're a person that makes $75,000 a year and your tax rate goes from whatever 25% to 24.5%, that ain't a lot of money, no matter how you spin it, right?
Especially since they're positioning themselves now as these economic populists, and people like Cenk are like lending credence to that
don't
notion.
Say that name. We're gonna see
oh man, it's just getting so much worse over there, isn't it?
Reaction.
No, it's funny. I want to comment on what Jedi said. I think he's pretty base. So I am extracting several things from it. One is there's a category in the law called puffery or in advertising, right? Where it's kind of exaggeration thing. So for example, this morning I called MAGA a satanic cult. I think that's all within the realm of political hyperbole. That's all good shit. You know, I'm happy for people to use those kind of
lower the temperature
exaggerations to go after their political opponents. The other is like applying the standards of the other side, which I think when you're saying lying now, I think if you're applying a standard which is itself dishonest, I think you're just pointing that out, and so I think there's nothing wrong with that. Then the third is the ultra base Joker moment where you're like, relative is dying of cancer and you blame it on Trump. Now
he said he was going to make healthcare. He said he was going to make healthcare better. It was going to be cheaper. It was going to be better than Obamacare.
That's the sixth stage of grief. Is when
now you can decide. Audience can decide on that spectrum. Where do you lie? But I think some of those need to be applied. Some maybe I'll withhold.
Can we all agree this? Let me ask you this, like a serious hypothetical. Let's say that on Trump's watch, grocery prices increase, or don't drop, or whatever we want to say based on a promise. He either imposes a tariff, he imposes a tariff, and so grocery prices increases, or he doesn't impose the tariff, but grocery prices continue to, increase slowly because of the 2% inflation rate. He doesn't cut them in half. Would you, on just principle, object to me running around every goddamn grocery store and slapping a stupid Donald Trump?
No.
I did that.
Absolutely need to do that, by the way.
Okay, good.
If the gas price goes up to $4 or whatever, if there's some OPEC fuckery or another conflict that breaks out, we absolutely should print those stickers and put them up on gas stations. I, of course, won't, because I drive a Tesla. So
why are you driving Tesla? You need to divest.
Well, listen, no.
It's like you're being funded by Peter Thiel himself.
No, he's not being funded.
And Polymarket.
Hutch just doesn't want to get on the bad side of our shadow prime minister. So.
Oh, true. Just like Cenk Uygur, bringing it back to what you were talking about. and frankly, guys, I don't want to say I told you so. There's a lot of...
How about that fight between Anna and Emma? That was some
rough.
Fuego. Yeah.
rough stuff, guys. If you guys don't know, there's a bit of a civil war happening in progressive online alt media left-wing circles, and at the center of it is accusations that TYT has either grifted or moved to the center or done some kind of pro-MAGA apologia or like positioning.
There are accusations.
Some people are
coming
saying
from the
things
guy.
of that nature, that sort. Some people are dealing in such dealings. And so shit's really popped off online on YouTube. There are channels who are like, whose sole purpose right now is to pick apart every fucking inconsistency and problem with TYT. And it's sad for me because I was actually defending a lot of Cenk stuff and TYT's coverage leading up to the election. I thought they were saying some pretty base things. I like was preparing to make a list of top tier content creators. Obviously, Josiah, Hutch, and Econoboy would be Z tiered. Wouldn't even appear on the list. Just kidding.
I said it before. I'll say it again. Pisco could put a list of his top 5 favorite Hutches, and our Hutch wouldn't even be tagged at all.
Our Hutch is the one true Hutch.
Sorry.
And I put them in A tier, which is like people were saying you're crazy. I've been A tier. But now I'm like more partial to Hassan than I am TYT. I see clips of Hassan being like, yeah, Cenk kind of never paid me above minimum wage when I was working for him, but I still love him. And in the meantime, Cenk is like, one, being like completely MAGA apologia. He's saying in retrospect he's happy that Kamala lost and therefore that Trump won. He's going to like Patrick Bet-David's show. Anna's going to Glenn Beck. They're going to Tim Pool to do this kind of agreement tour. And they're just saying the most ridiculous, stupid shit, inventing stuff, saying like MAGA populists, right-wing populists, they're going to be the big defenders of the Dreamers. They're going to be the ones really pushing Trump to be anti-Pentagon. It's all hocus pocus. It's a fugazi. It's a woozy. And it doesn't make sense.
My theory is that I feel like they're drinking their own Kool-Aid. Like it's bullshit, but I feel like they've convinced themselves that you really can build a bridge between right-wing and left-wing populism. I think they're full-on believers, truly. What do you guys say? I don't know if I can call it like a full-on grift because I think they're wrong, but I think that they've convinced themselves that they're right.
I really don't think grifting is a proper label for Anna or Cenk. I mean, they just seem to have a long history of just saying what they think and dealing with the fallout. So I don't know. I don't really think grifting is the right label, but I think that they're just very, very incorrect, like you said, Hutch. Like I think that they have this idea in their head where the anti-establishmentarianism, whoever coined that term, is actually really the right way to go, and populism is the right way to go. And I think that the problem with the Glenn Beck interview, for those that didn't see it, obviously Anna goes on Glenn Beck's, I guess he has a podcast or something like that, and he has his own studio. And it's one of the problems that has been inherent, and it's one of the reasons why you see constant criticism of conversations like this. It's not that we think that people of the left and the right can't agree that there are problems in society and sit down and break bread and have reasonable conversations. I mean, we have to repeat all the time that people like Rob Noor and like Lactoid and like these like conservatives in the space, like we can sit down and talk to them and have a reasonable conversation and hang out with them like normal people. And we can even agree, like Anna and Glenn did over and over again, like, hey, like certain things are problems. Don't we agree that crime is a problem? Don't we not like crime? Don't we agree that healthcare is a problem? Shouldn't something be done about the healthcare? It's like, well, no shit. Obviously, you can agree with that. But when you ask a conservative what should be done about healthcare, they talk about taking away Medicare and Medicaid and making those poor people go out and work to get their own health insurance. When a Democrat talks about what should be done about healthcare, they're talking about expanding Medicare and Medicaid and having Medicare for kids and, these kind of more supportive programs in the style of many other countries that have made programs like that work. And these are not reconcilable positions. That's the thing about the Anna Glenn Beck interview that's so infuriating, is that you cannot reconcile a guy who believes abortion should be banned and someone who doesn't believe that. There's no middle ground. Someone just has to win in that argument in terms of what policy actually gets applied. And that's the issue with Anna going on and being like, oh, these left wingers just don't want to sit around and talk to right wingers. It's not that. There just legitimately are irreconcilable differences in policy between these two groups of people.
Like supporting Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just can't do anything about some of these positions, right? For instance, like a conservative might say, wages being low is a big problem, but a conservative blames all these Mexican immigrants coming in, whereas a Democrat would say we should raise the minimum wage. At the same time that a conservative would say we shouldn't even have a minimum wage. I mean, these are just not, you can't come to middle ground with the MAGA types on all these issues. And that's kind of the problem with Cenk and Anna. They seem to assume that there's some populist room to get things like defense cuts or abolishing the FBI, or maybe he does actually expand Medicare because that's the populist thing to do. Like these are, it's delusional to assume this.
This guy, I think I know this guy. I can't remember, but the name sounds familiar. He says at least Cenk at least didn't gaslight his followers earlier in this year that Biden was all there like MSNBC did. So, a couple of things.
The Trump curve. Here comes the Trump curve.
Yeah, there does come the Trump curve. But I was actually going to say this. I mean, if you want to compare Cenk's record to MSNBC's and you want to hang your hat on the Biden is all there notion, we just respond with Fox News. Fox News had to pay nearly $800 million to settle a defamation lawsuit against Dominion Voting Systems because they verifiably lied based on evidence provided in discovery. There is no counterpart to this on MSNBC or CNN.
You're missing the point, Josiah. He's comparing MSNBC to Cenk and saying that Cenk is better than MSNBC. That's the comparison, not to MAGA Republicans.
Well, no, he's using Cenk as an opportunity to attack
is he a
liberal
conservative
media.
guy?
Yes,
Oh,
and he's using it to attack liberal media. But because I've got Fox as my trump card, I'll always win that debate, and Pine Creek, per usual, will always lose. So
wait, what's this link? What's this link about Nancy Mace right there? What is that? Did she get caught slipping?
I can't click the link.
I can't even click it.
Let me see here. I just touch.
It's a virus. Let's say.
Oh wow, this is a really funny fuck up.
While you're doing that, the response on the MSNBC thing is like, yeah, it's fucking stupid that what's his name said, Joe Scarborough said that like this Biden, I've seen him behind scenes and he's the best Biden that's ever been. That's dumb. And Cenk got praise from me specifically on him calling for Joe Biden to step down earlier than a lot of people. So I praise him for that. But ever since the election, when he started saying in retrospect, I'm happy that Kamala lost, seems like you're doing a heel turn, buddy. And I'm going to call that out.
Oh,
what happened?
I mean, like Biden.
Yeah, let me share it here.
I was gonna say, Trump's doctor literally came out and said he was like the healthiest person he had ever seen. Right?
Yeah,
like, this is absurd to say a morbidly obese, old man is the healthiest person you've ever seen. But that's just part of the propaganda war of both parties, right?
Nancy Mace says, yes, I was physically accosted tonight. More to come. Hold the line. Oh, no, what happened? Nancy Mace, a pro-trans guy out of Illinois, assaulted her.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. That's awful.
Why does that matter, though? It's not like... Does that matter?
Nancy Mace is like... She's literally just an attention seeker. Like that's the sense that I get from her. No, like that's the sense that I get from her. It's like, why is she like... Even like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, they are not putting this much attention on how much they hate trans people. Like Nancy Mace has chosen, this is my thing. This is how I get in the news.
No, this is her thing for the moment. She always has a new thing.
No, exactly, right.
Give it 2 months and she'll have another new thing.
Like,
remember her Scarlet A?
Yeah, like she's just someone who like desperately wants attention. And I we'll see what this is actually building towards. Like maybe she's going to run for governor or Senate or something like that, or maybe she's really just fucking desperate to get a position in the Trump cabinet. But she's like the Kristen Sinema of the Republicans in the House.
Way
like
worse. I mean, way worse. Sinema has her theatrical side. I mean, she did something earlier today, which is really fucked up. But Nancy Mace is even more shamelessly dishonest by far than Kirsten Sinema. I'm sorry, real quick, because Pine Creek responded. Pine Creek will always lose, said by the guy whose party lost all the swing states in the popular vote. I think you would have a great point if 2024 were the last election in American history. But you weren't saying this and you weren't adopting that humility when your party got its ass kicked in 2020.
Yeah, but you by just said he'll always lose, but he's pointed just one instance where he won, and so that disproves your point that he always will lose.
No, not at all, Pisco. Now Pisco's always going to lose because I said Pine Creek will always lose the debate. What debate?
Oh, the specific debate about MSNBC.
Exactly. So
dude, wokeness. I hate it when people say wokeness is why Democrats lost. It makes me want to fucking kill myself in a video game.
Who said that? Wait, who?
Dude, Pine Creek. It's just people who say it. Pine Creek said it in the chat just now. He's like, people underestimate how much wokeness played a part. And it's like, this is not. Why do people think this? Why do people think this is a thing?
I think this is This is a PF Young. I think this guy like works with PF Young. I think that's we've had.
You've been
conversations
collectively
before.
gaslit
Yeah.
into thinking this is a thing. Like,
That's
no,
his thing, man. It's wokeness. It's the fact that there are like double-digit trans people and that there's a black woman as vice president. It's all these DEI initiatives. It's this crazy shit.
Like, yeah, you can't convince me this isn't gaslighting when Republicans, when polled, think that 25% of people are trans. We know that that's wrong, and it's not just wrong by like we think it's 2%, but actually it's 1%. This is a crazy, or this is like when Matt Walsh on Joe Rogan said that millions of children are on puberty.
4,500.
This is a wild.
Yeah.
And so for people who say wokeness is a big problem, is the problem that Democrats just don't hate trans people or immigrants? Or is the problem that Republicans have this incredibly outsized ability to propagandize things to their base, right? And the response from the Democrats, what should the response be? Should the response be whenever Republicans overreact to a problem that doesn't exist, are Democrats supposed to just like pretend that those problems are real and change our entire worldview? Oh, you're right. We actually do hate trans people. They are 25% of the country. Like, what do we do in the face of that information? Like, it's a civil rights issue.
There was a really good moment going back to what we were talking about right before you start speaking right there, but like there was a really good moment on that New York Times panel that it's not unlisted anymore. It's live, by the way. Anybody can find it. But McCarthy very smugly was like, he made a comment about how when Republicans lose, we don't have to go to therapist. And then
that's a good McCarthy.
Sarah Longwell replied by, well, yeah, you just don't believe that you lost. And
right.
That's certainly the case. It's like 80%, I believe, was the most recent figure. 80% of Republicans in 2020, when it comes to 2020, just straight up don't believe the outcome of the election. And so there's all this pressure.
You're wrong, though. 90+% think the elections work just fine now, if you saw that.
Right, yeah, there was like a 70-point swing, right? But like, there's all this pressure on liberals right now. And like, listen, I'm fine asking the question, like, okay, what went wrong in this election? We lost. First of all, just saying like we lost, and then asking the question, like, what could we have done better? What lessons did we learn? How can we carry that into the midterms? How can we carry that into 2028? And I have no issue doing that. And there's all this pressure on liberals right now to like come to Jesus and really do a lot of soul searching, figure out where you went wrong. And there's just this insane double standard because one side of this country just, that's what they believe. They believed it in 2018. I mean, it's not even just general. They believe that we cheated in the 2022 midterms as well.
You got your answer, Akana boy.
Oh my God, Pine Creek, you're right. No, Josiah, you're right. If only Kamala had said that trans people shouldn't compete in the sport of their chosen gender, then she would have won. That would have made the difference. No, you're right, because it's not like we have examples of Colin Allred in Texas doing that exact thing. He won. He's actually the next. Oh, wait. He actually lost by much more of a margin than Beto did in 2018, even though Beto ran a much more progressively coded campaign. Oh, God, if only fucking Democrats said that women shouldn't have trans people in their category of sport. That's the thing that makes a significant difference. No, it's the big macro issues. It's inflation. It's Biden running for re-election. Like, I just don't think... Yeah, go on, Hutch. Sorry.
That's a really good example of what you're talking about before, about like manufactured issues. There's this guy named Governor Cox in Utah, and I believe we spoke about this before, but the Utah state legislature passed a bill to ban trans kids from competing in sports. And he wrote this like really beautiful letter. And he talked about how he ended it by saying, like he called attention to the high suicide rates, and he said, like, I don't understand their experience, but I want them to live, which was like a really, like, I got chills when I read it. But in that letter, he laid out what the quote unquote problem was in Utah. There was one trans girl competing in the entire state of Utah. And the state legislature passed a bill addressing one trans girl in the entire state, which is just the perfect example of Republicans inventing an issue. And how salient it is, whatever. Some data shows us some things and whatever.
Well, what's interesting too is kind of on that note, the Philadelphia Inquirer, there was a reporter there, probably I think it was like 2 weeks after the election, did some investigative reporting with Teamsters members, in Pennsylvania who voted for Donald Trump. And the whole thing, I'll send you the link. It's fascinating. They were motivated primarily by cultural issues. And many of them even recognize that, like President Biden saved their pensions. But at the end of the day, they were more motivated. Now, obviously, this doesn't necessarily reflect all Teamsters who swung from Biden to Trump or just to Trump. But it is amazing. I mean, there's a reason that Fox does what it does and right-wing media does what it does, and how it's, brain rotted people like Pine Creek because of the handful of trans athletes in this country. This has become a more salient and personal issue to them, even though statistically speaking, it has absolutely no significance in their day-to-day lives over even like material issues. Like it really is interesting to see that there is evidence bearing that out, that a lot of these people have been radicalized by cultural issues and not necessarily kitchen table issues.
But here's the problem, Josiah, is that because people have this disconnect, people have this in their head where they're like, people say they were motivated by these culture war issues. That means that the Democrats need to acquiesce on all of these issues maximally to stop that from happening. To which I'll just say, look, it is not like Democrats are running campaigns or making primarily part of their campaigns drag story hour, trans people playing sports, CRT in our schools. These are all things Republicans made up. And so the problem is that it's like Democrats just weren't doing these things in the first place. So even if they continue to not do these things, which again,
you're telling me they're not teaching esoteric legal theory to fourth graders? Really?
No, right. Like,
Hutch, don't be
you want me to believe that,
Hutch,
Econo boy?
Stop it.
Okay,
Stop
buddy.
it. Yeah. It's sixth graders, okay? No one's saying to fourth graders, come on, man.
Yeah.
You have to straw man them.
And you can make the claim, maybe the most intelligent claim that you could make is, well, Democrats take the bait on some of these issues, right? Like, oh, trans women in sports. And so now Democrats are having to defend trans women in sports and they just shouldn't do that. To which we're now stuck in kind of a rock and a hard place, right? Because again, we are Democrats. We don't hate trans people. We don't think, trans women in high school playing on the volleyball team is like that big of a deal, right? In the grand scheme of things. Like, even if you think it's a problem, even if you think it's wrong, there are just so many other more important issues. Call it a states' rights issue if you want, whatever, right? Like, that's a big problem. And so I don't know what we're supposed to do in that regard. Like, Democrats don't do this, right?
Well, to be fair, you're also asking a question, assuming that they have an answer. They don't want us to do anything. They want us to lose. And there's a reason that they're weaponizing this issue against us. They don't want us to have an answer. They just want us to lose elections. And so, anyway, interesting stuff. I think we should also talk about, since it's a segue to, Cenk and Anna, since Pisco was talking about that. Did you see that Donald Trump, spoiler alert, please brace yourselves, every single one of you, he's going to fire Lina Khan. He's going to fire Lina Khan and replace her with someone who is very much not Lina Khan. And I was assured by some people, as a matter of fact, Cenk and Anna somewhat hinted at this when the election was ongoing. They're like, wow, Mark Cuban, one of Vice President Harris's key advisors, wants Lina Khan to be fired, and Kamala Harris hasn't said she's going to protect her. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance is a really big fan of Lina Khan, suggesting that if Trump were to win and J.D. Vance were to win, that Lina Khan might be better protected.
The right-wing populists will hear about that, and they will reverse Trump's decision. They will reverse it. You've got to trust
our
the
last
MAGA
hope
right-wing
is
populists.
Our last hope is Dave Portnoy hears about this, brings it up on Joe Rogan, and they really do a campaign to force Trump's hand, because Trump wants to be popular among his base. So he's going to need to protect Lina Khan.
Oh, my goodness.
Hutch, what do you think about that, man? Do you think there's going to be any... first off, do you think there's going to be any pushback to Trump doing this, number one? And number two, do you think the populists of either persuasion, in terms of like influencers, do you think they're going to speak up? Do you think Cenk and Anna are going to go, holy shit, we hope that, he was going to protect Lina Khan. This is a really bad decision. Do you expect Dave Portnoy to respond to this or no?
No. Well, they were talking about Anna mentioned the incoming Secretary of Labor, and apparently she was touting that person, saying that they voted for the PRO Act and that this made them super pro labor. But I don't know much about person? Are you guys up to date on who they are?
Lori Chavez, remember, and what's interesting was I talked to Maxwell Frost and that video is going to be coming up soon, and he talked about, like, as far as Republicans go, Lori Chavez de Remmer is about the best you can do because she did vote for the PRO Act. But here's what's interesting. He made a really good point. He's like, but it's bullshit, he said, because Donald Trump, even when he's out of office, has this cultish devotion or cultish grip on the Republican Party. And he said he could have picked up the phone and gotten 50 co-sponsors on the Republican Party for the PRO Act and never did. So this idea that he's going to change his mind on the PRO Act is bullshit. But yeah, as far as Republicans go, apparently she's got a fairly pro-labor record.
And just say that's true on any issue.
Yeah.
Like if Trump had said, you know what, actually I am in favor of lowering the eligibility age for Medicare down to 50, that shit would have passed like the next day, right? Like Trump just doesn't want any of these things to happen, or he thinks they're useful political tools. The Lori Chavez lady, she actually lost re-election in this in her House seat. It's one of the reasons why she got this job. And, I'm open to the idea that because the unions are splitting their votes, that, you might see people like Josh Hawley, who gives a lot of lip service to union issues and labor organizing issues. Like, I'm open to the idea that Republicans might just have a pro-labor wing in their party. But look, Republicans have never been the party of organized labor. It's never happened. They're literally, Trump's lawyers argued that the NLRB just shouldn't exist as an institution because it's unconstitutional. So yes, while it is the case that Lori Chavez or whatever is the head of the NLRB, assuming she gets confirmed, I don't know if you need a full confirmation, however that works. But while that is true, yeah, Linda McMahon is going to be the head of the Secretary of Education, a department that Trump says he wants to just get rid of, right? So I don't really think we have a lot of reason to have faith that, the Republicans are all of a sudden going to be extremely pro-labor. I mean, that'd be great if they were, but look, I think there's a reason why the Republicans were fighting tooth and nail to prevent the Democrats from putting actually pro-labor people on the NLRB board before they leave office, which they unfortunately succeeded with, which would be weird for them to do if they're just going to, what are they just going to replace the person with another super pro-labor person? No, probably not. They're going to put some corporate shill on the NLRB board so that they can push through a bunch of anti-labor stuff, which Republicans have always done. So, yeah.
It's pretty fucked, guys. I mean, I think if we go down the line on every single one of these issues where Cenk and Anna think that there could be a right-wing populist uprising to move Trump to become more populist, I think we'll go down the line. Immigration, they're dreaming. Labor policy, they're fucking dreaming. Monopoly, they're dreaming. Gaza, they're dreaming. Foreign intervention, they're dreaming. All these things, they're dreaming.
Ukraine,
whatever they want is largely dictated by what Trump says. The thought leaders influence what the right-wing MAGA populists believe. When I said this morning that MAGA is a satanic cult, I did so purposely because it very much operates like a cult following the second coming of Satan. In this metaphor, Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's a rough one. Have we talked about Luigi? Have we talked about this guy yet on this show? I don't know if you guys think this is a worthy topic, but it's in the news. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, what is there to say?
Well, obviously, there's been a robust debate as to the moral righteousness of this guy and what should actually end up happening with him. And it's I liken it almost to like Israel and Gaza, where I've seen, like, for instance, like Elizabeth Warren has been criticized today because she came out and said something along the lines of like, look, you've got to keep in mind that our system is cruel and it maybe pushes people towards these radical acts because of how radically terrible our system is. And so naturally people are saying she's in favor of assassinating CEOs. And it's like, well, no, this reminds me of people who say, look, I'm extremely pro-Palestinian and I'm not in favor of Hamas. We just have to recognize the historical context, which might lead groups like this to take power. And then that analysis leads to, oh, well, you must be pro-terrorist. And it's like, no, you dumbass. Like, I think there's a difference between, recognizing the historical accounting of things and what we might do to prevent future historical accountings ending up similarly. And actually being in support of like terrorist acts. I think this is actually pretty analogous.
I do think that it's a little bit alarming that there seems to be celebrations of people that appear to have been suffering from a mental health crisis, and it just keeps happening over and over again. Like we saw a little bit of that with what was his name, David Crooks, the first shooter. We saw a little bit of that with like Aaron Bushnell, and now this guy, it appears, I don't know his whole story, but it appears that he was dealing with chronic pain and then got into hallucinogens. I don't know how much of this has been confirmed, but people are piecing things together from his posts. And he seems to have gotten into hallucinogens like 6 months ago and stopped like contacting his friends and family. And people are, you know, elevating this person as though they're like kind of like a folk hero. But it seems like this guy was having a mental crisis. That does worry me a little bit. I'm a little bit disturbed that people are elevating this guy as a hero. Even whatever grievance you have with the healthcare system, we should not be celebrating vigilante justice, because it's one thing when it's a cause that you like, but
Batman would never. If
vigilante justice becomes the new norm, then what happens when it's an issue like, you know, like somebody who's anti-abortion, you know, starts bombing abortion clinics again? And so, yeah, I find the whole thing very deeply disturbing, to be honest. I don't want to be a buzzkill, but it's a little weird to me.
There's a lot. There was a funny instance where Ben Shapiro came out and said, "This is terrible. This guy got shot," and his own audience was like, "Actually, Ben Shapiro, in case you hadn't noticed, the right wing is also very populist. So this is based from our perspective as well," which was really funny to see. And I think Matt Walsh had a similar interaction with his audience on Twitter, like, "Guys, real conservatives aren't supposed to celebrate CEOs getting shot." And then a bunch of conservatives are like, "No, I voted for Donald Trump 3 times, and I think this is based." It's like, oh, you guys are learning how crazy your own movement is now.
There was a joke that Nikki Haley Republicans there's now like 3 of them that are doing the firebombing Walmart Basel tweets, and Maoists are at 0.
More than I expected.
It's Nikki Haley Republicans 3 and Maoists Maoist revolutionaries 0. It's a funny little.
Yeah, so full disclosure, like I've not followed this story particularly closely, because the truth is I just don't care. I mean, like obviously I think it's wrong that some guy gets executed in broad daylight, no matter what his tax bracket is. But I genuinely actually don't understand the level of attention this thing is getting.
Major CEO was assassinated like where I live. What do you mean? You don't understand why it's
it was on video. And there's like clear
it's
video
of it happening. Insane video, Josiah. What the fuck
is this like okay, again, Pisco, you're a lawyer. Is this the first time we've seen somebody on video get executed, get murked in broad daylight?
No, but it's on the streets of Manhattan, and it's
is this the first time that somebody's been murked on the streets of Manhattan in broad daylight on video?
That's not true, but it's a major guy.
Yeah. So, it's an important.
It's one of the major dudes.
I understand. It's an important person. Okay. Well, this to me is like further reason why I'm not going to like particularly spend a lot of time on this. Like, this guy's life was no more valuable or less valuable than anyone else has been murked in broad daylight by somebody else. I just don't give a shit. I think it's sad.
You don't give a shit that someone was assassinated in my city. This is what Cenk and Anna mean when they say liberals are in favor of more crime.
Do you give a shit with it? Do you cover all of the other the assassinations in broad daylight in Manhattan?
I certainly do. Every single one. I have a running list.
Lying sack of shit. No, you don't.
Wait, can I be honest?
You care because this guy is rich, and that's the only people you care about. You think he's better than poor people. I understand.
No, I haven't given a view. Listen, I haven't given a view yet.
I understand.
The shooter himself was rich. He was
rich.
I'm not going to validate.
Oh, look, he's buying into the narrative.
I'm not going to validate this. I think that this is just not, I don't know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not important to me.
Listen, I'm going to give you my honest take. My honest take is this. In many ways, Batman is my favorite superhero. And he is my favorite superhero. And I think that, Batman's a vigilante, he has a code or whatever. Batman would never, okay? Batman would never. But part of the story, the integral story of Batman is Batman's also a rich guy. He's a billionaire, trillionaire who makes all of his toys. And the reason he can't use those to better the city is because there's this endemic, systemic problems in Gotham City that can't be addressed. And so he needs to become a symbol. Now, I think that this is corrupt, like horrible when you do terrorism and assassinate people. I don't want fucking people with silencers, louderners attacking CEOs in the city, because I don't think it's a way to help the problem. I think it's immoral. But it doesn't mean that we can't address like the Gotham systemic issues that address the world or that are facing us as Americans every single day. And I'm pretty sure everyone who's like a working class person, or even people who are not, people in middle class, you have interacted with the health insurance system, and it's a fucking nightmare. I myself, like, there was one time I needed to get a drug. It took like weeks and weeks and weeks. They were fighting me every step of the way, and so it's just, I understand that impulse. I think that's where some of the memes are coming from. He is genuinely like, it was a very peculiar story with a lot of like intriguing curiosities, which I think is also a reason why there's a lot of meme stuff about it. I don't agree necessarily with the memes, but people are going to people. And yeah, I think it's deplorable someone was killed, but we can also address the systemic issues.
I think
you kind of have to walk a tightrope a little bit, because it's kind of reminiscent of like October 7th, for example. Like people wanted to talk about, rightly so, people wanted to talk about the conditions for Gazans in the immediate aftermath of that horrible atrocity that took place. But you have to be careful how you have that discussion, because you don't want to say it in a way that justifies or implies a justification for that action. And so it's a similar kind of situation. There's nothing wrong with talking about the problems with the healthcare system, but some people are definitely leaning into like, oh, this guy was a fucking hero.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's hard to say, because it's almost what's the rule where it's like something becomes such a meme that it's hard to tell if it's a meme anymore. I can't remember what the rule is called. Maybe is it Poe's law? I don't remember, but I think there's something like that going on, where I think a lot of people are just memeing super crazily close to the sun. So it's hard to say if there's actually like it's hard to say how many people are actually just like, yeah, well, like we love it when CEOs get gunned down.
I think
no, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people
right now.
Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people who would say that. Like, I think what was it, like a quarter of people actually, when polled, said that they wished that the Trump assassination succeeded or something like that. So there's a lot of people that are just like okay with political violence. But I kind of see where Josiah's coming from, that I can see. Like, the first thing, my reaction when I saw this news story, when I was talking to my wife, was like, I guess I don't know why this is a big news story. Like, obviously I get because he's a CEO and like, oh, he's a rich person, but like, black kids in Chicago get killed every fucking day. Nobody gives a fuck, right? And that's because they're poor and black, right? And so I just don't really know. I just don't really know why. Unfortunately, I do know why, but it's not reasonable to me that the CEO gets like an outsized amount of coverage. But that's kind of more of an egalitarian concern.
No, 100%. And again,
Yeah.
I just want to be clear. I do think that this, I haven't even watched the video, but from what little I've glimpsed of it, I mean, this is just outright murder. It's super fucked up. I don't think the guy deserved to die simply because he was a CEO, or even the CEO of a, health insurance company or whatever it was. I just, like, to me, I would understand a disproportionate focus if it were a political leader, but Rich just doesn't, that just is irrelevant to me. It's nothing. I think that I would understand the level of attention if it were a governor or a senator or someone who's in elected office who wields enormous power, but just simply some rich guy. It's just, it's not important.
I think where lefties go right it's not when they praise the CEO getting assassinated, but I think that some of the messaging that's come out of this that I think that I agree with is that people don't recognize how cruel our healthcare system is. Our healthcare system is cruel, and it does kill people, right? And that is fucked up, that we just kind of live in that context and don't really think about the full implications of the systems that we've set up. And look, at the end of the day, you have to ration healthcare somehow, and you can't approve every treatment, and it's very difficult to do that. And like, none of these systems are perfect, but the justice of our healthcare system seems intuitively to people to be very low, right? That, like, I think that where a lot of the sympathy for this guy comes from is kind of like what Elizabeth Warren said. It's like, there's a real systemic problem. People feel like our healthcare system is fundamentally unjust, or at least there's a lot of people that feel that way. And they, it's not that they necessarily want to be the vanguard assassinating CEOs, but it reminds me of a scene in I think it was in Legion or something, and it was Legion. I think it wasn't Legion. There was a story, a movie with Daniel Craig, and it was based about this sort of Jewish group of people who hid out in the woods during World War II. And there's a scene in that movie where they capture a Nazi and they just beat him to death super duper brutally. And while at the same time the film sort of explains like how brutal that is and how locally wrong it is to do that, it's like, look, these people are being tortured, and it's because of this broader ideology that this guy chose to be a part of. And there's just like some moral grayness here, and it just doesn't feel right, but there's some broader issues at play here. And I think that pointing to the fact that our broader healthcare system is very cruel and unjust is probably reasonable. Although, of course, you can say these things as Elizabeth Warren did without actually saying that, oh, I'm actually in favor of killing CEOs. Like, that seems like a crazy take.
There was a Gallup poll that came out just this last week, actually, that showed maybe for the first time, a plurality of Americans think that government should subsidize, like fully subsidize healthcare. It was 48%, 45% favored the insurance model. So, you know, we're a long ways to go before we can do something like expanding Medicare to everybody. Even if we get to like 52, 53%, you know, the Senate hurdles, I mean, we really need to get to like 60, 65% before we can even really realistically have that conversation. But
so I'm gonna take another stab at this real quick, because there seems to be some confusion, because I don't understand how Josiah has I could really care. It's just a rich guy take. So again, this guy's talking about, he's like, you know, if you could poll somebody about overthrowing the 1%, you get overwhelming support. I understand why people despise CEOs, and CEOs in particular of health insurance companies that deny people's claims. That's not a mystery to me. I'm saying, unless you have that position, if you have the Taylor Lorenz position, wasn't it the Taylor Lorenz? Was she the one?
That was my Super Bowl, by the way, when she went on Piers Morgan. Oh my God. Can I just say?
So I don't know the full scoop, but if you have the Taylor Lorenz view, I understand why this particular story and this particular person matters to you. But if this is not your animating principle, which is kill all CEOs or, you know, overthrow the rich in a violent way, I just don't. This isn't a big deal to me. This
it's an act of terrorism in the center of the world. It's a political statement as well as a crime.
I understand.
How is it not a humongous story?
What do you? I go back to the way Econoboy articulated it earlier on my behalf, and perhaps he did a much better job. People die all the time, and you don't give a fuck. I'm not going to give a fuck about this particular.
Oh, now who's sounding like the October 7th pro-Palestinian mother? Okay, listen. I want to talk about Taylor Lorenz.
Wait a minute. Well, when I say I don't give a fuck, I'm not celebrating this man's death. I think it was wrong that he was murdered. I think it was
wrong. People die every day. What are we going to
do? You know what? I'm curious. Are you like fucking Google? Are you refreshing your fucking Twitter page for what is the guy's UHC? Is that the name of the company? Is this all you're focused on? I do politics. No. I don't give a fuck.
This is politics.
CEO.
This is politics. It is a political killing, and assassination's in vogue now. We have 2 assassination attempts against Donnie Boy, and a 3rd successful one against Mr. I guess according to you, Mr. Hitler.
Pisco, look down and refresh it. Refresh your page right now. Look for the latest.
What's the difference,
story? God damn.
The difference is that obviously October 7th was a mass killing, and so that's going to be, you know, like if you went to a school and killed like 40 kids in Chicago, like that would be a news event. But obviously, if 100 kids a year get shot in, you know, in the midst of gang violence for some reason, that's just a statistic. People kind of just think about that in their day-to-day lives. So that's the reason why I say that. It's not that I don't have sympathy, obviously, for this guy's family, and it's not that I want him to die or anything like that. I just always have a cynical, you know, taste in my mouth whenever a rich white guy gets shot on the street, and all of a sudden it's a big news issue because he's a rich CEO, and it's like,
so now who's doing identity politics? Listen, it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
What I'm saying? No, you're being a dumbass.
What's the comparison?
Like, you get the comparison is that thousands of people get fucking murdered on the street in poor communities fucking every fucking year, and nobody gives a shit. They don't get any sort of outsized coverage. But because this guy's a CEO, all of a sudden we're supposed to have this sort of outsized, you know, reason to care. Like, I'm just saying that
if this CEO was black, I think it would have got the same amount of attention.
Well, again, there's a class issue. It's an intersectional component at play. I'm just saying that this guy's murder is a tragedy, much like all of these murders are a tragedy. And I just find it weird that we give outsized influence and outsized coverage to like these sort of like, for some reason we find it to be more salient when a rich person or a celebrity gets killed, and it's like, but I find it to be crazy that anybody gets killed in an equal way. Like, I don't see why we should have more news coverage for one versus another. I don't know. It just seems weird to me.
Taylor Lorenz did not have the best reaction. I think that's something we can all agree on.
What did she say exactly? I remember seeing something she said.
She was like, I'm feeling joy today.
Yeah. And then Piers asked her, like, okay, should we kill every CEO of these insurance companies? And she said no. And it's like, that's not a good answer. Well, why not? You're filled with joy, you know. Like it was not a great moment for her.
When Kamala said that we should be more joyful, this is not what she meant.
Taylor
yeah.
Lorenz,
Just,
man,
why are you mad at me? Why are you mad?
bro,
I'm just.
she's a bit of a mixed bag because she did this. I thought she did an interview with Libs of TikTok.
Yes,
I thought she did such a good job with that interview. It was like so interesting, and I felt like she did a really good job of kind of. It made it, in my opinion, it made Libs of TikTok look very, very silly. But then she just
more than
hits us
Libs of
with these,
TikTok
like,
does.
what'd you say?
More than Libs of TikTok does. You said Taylor Lorenz.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
she did a good job of like exposing her, I thought. But man, she's just so unhinged about like COVID protocols and now this shit. It's a lot.
Raw dog in the air.
It's a lot, bro.
Did you hear when she said that? She's like, all you motherfuckers are so irresponsible. You're raw dog in the air.
Who said that?
She says, yeah,
Taylor.
She's
On
super. I think she has some kind of a comorbidity.
No, on Twitter.
Oh.
And so she's like furious that people aren't like everybody isn't wearing masks and we don't have the same mitigation protocols in place now that we did in 2020. Like she's just
a little unhinged.
yeah, she's
but,
just yeah.
Anyway, but I just thought that it has been interesting at the very least to see people's reaction to it. And I think that one of the reasons why it caught on isn't because of establishment news just having like an outsized sympathy for a rich person. It seems to be the opposite almost, where it's like there's a lot of people that almost have like an outsized antagonism towards rich people, and so there's both things going kind of at play here, which I find to be quite interesting. But I do think that Elizabeth Warren's fundamental point that, look, I think that where a lot of this sympathy comes from is just people really hating our health insurance system. Right? That's the big takeaway here, and hopefully we can go forward with a better system in the next election. If
we're in the middle of significant rise in populism, and this is like a very plays into that theme that we're in right now. Guy who is ostensibly a victim of the healthcare industry or a healthcare system, just straight up murking CEO of an insurance company. I mean, it's a very appropriate, fitting event for the times that we live in. That's why I think
his eyes at a New York cafe. He said, "None of my business."
I mean, I'd call the cops if I saw it. I'd call the cops. I call the cops, but I wouldn't dedicate a weekly fucking podcast to it. I wouldn't like. But this is how my brain works. You know what I didn't watch? I didn't watch the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial either. I totally passed. I passed on that zeitgeist. Like literally,
bro, I was obsessed with that trial. Like no bullshit.
Apparently, it made the career of was it Nick Rakita? Like that was.
Yeah. In a way, it was also his downfall.
My experience with Amber Heard was Drive Angry, Aquaman, and Never Back Down. That's it. And Johnny Depp, I mean, I love his acting work, but I literally skipped all of it. So like I had a friend of mine back in Louisville, and I remember we were out drinking, and she was like, "Have you seen the bee meme?" And apparently, like when Amber Heard was testifying, she made some sort of strange facial reaction and mentioned that her dog stepped on a bee, and it was like became this viral sensation. It went right over my fucking head because I was like, "What are you talking about? I have no idea what this shit is." This like true crime stuff does nothing.
Celebrity celebrity profiles and stuff are just not a big.
Can we talk real quick about like I don't know if you have another topic in mind, but I do want to have a conversation about is populist rhetoric necessary for the Democratic Party moving forward?
Yeah.
Like, do we need to do we need to embrace it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
I have a lot of reservations about populism, but I'm a bit conflicted now because I feel like it feels like it's more or less necessary. Like I don't know if you can win national politics right now without, at least for the presidency, in a purple district.
You see the slogans. You see the populist slogans.
Well, there's also certain positions as well. Like I think that there are some candidates who I wouldn't really say have populist rhetoric, but they have sort of an anti-establishment vibe. Like Andy Kim is the best example of this, where like Andy Kim is a pretty moderate Democrat by all counts. Like he's not from the Obama administration. He's not this crazily left-wing progressive Democrat. But he had a lot of Trump voters vote for him because they said, look, you just don't feel like one of these establishment types, and you seem different. You seem like a challenge to the system, and you can see like even on the right, like maybe Nancy Mace is an example of this, where like she's very anti-establishment, but she's not like a MAGA like right-wing crazy person. And so
I'm sorry, who?
well,
Nancy Mace?
per the policies, right? Per the policies. So I just think that you do need something like that, but it's about the issues that you pick. Like it's not going to be mass deportations, but something that, for instance, Chris Murphy mentioned on Twitter was he said that the next DNC chair should commit to only raising money from individuals and not any corporate or PAC contributions at all. And I think that that is the right move. I think that's a good example of like, this is, you know, you're still going to raise a lot of money.
Talking about the primaries, or is he talking about the general?
Well, I think he's saying like for how the DNC gets the money that it distributes to its candidates. So I'm not sure, but in general, I think that that's a good
kneecapping yourself though, because if Republicans are going to take in all this PAC money, then isn't that just putting yourself at an incredible disadvantage?
You ultimately can't control what PACs do. So if a billionaire wants to start a PAC to support progressives, I guess that they could, or Democrats in general. But in general, though, I think that that kind of rhetoric is good because it allows a very like populist attack on the Republicans. Like, look, you're going to raise $1 billion no matter what. It's clear that you can raise a shitload of money on individual contributions anyway. And it allows you to say, look, this guy's bought and sold by big corporations and big moneyed interests. You know, look at this super PAC that Elon Musk started up, and Elon Musk isn't exactly a very popular guy. But you can't really say that if you're Joe Biden, because you are taking all that same money from not the same people, but the same class of people. So I think that's just an example where, you know, this is like a populist policy and rhetoric that can be established in the next election that I think would be actually pretty good thing to do.
Hutch, is this the guy who do you know this guy, Ogre Boy?
I know him.
Okay.
I know him.
So he's also in my replies a lot too. Like usually when he's trying to pick fights with you and Peace Cove, then I catch strays from it.
Yeah.
I blocked him. I blocked him on Twitter.
I just want to say this. I'm not convinced that simply delivering policy will win over empty Trumpian rhetoric. I am not convinced.
Complete bullshit.
I am not convinced at all. And Biden himself is proof of it. Biden took the biggest step away from neoliberal politics in 40 years. Now, I understand people are going to say it's not enough. I agree. But it was the biggest step by far. And he and his party were not rewarded for it. I am not convinced. Somebody is going to have to actually show me where, and they would only have Biden as the data point, where that was rewarded. And if you, so I'm sorry, I do not believe it.
Yeah, Biden was not a neoliberal. Biden was investing in America. He was maintaining some protectionism. He was highly, interested in promoting labor as opposed to capital. He was, again, shutting down monopolies with the FTC and with his Department of Justice. I mean, this is all substantive, actually very important, and real leftists, like, by the way, Hassan, who had Lina Khan on his stream yesterday, will acknowledge that's huge. It was huge, and they're substantial. They're actual policies. It won him over. He lost union support. Union support, he bled it.
Yeah. So Ogre Boy says biggest step is a low bar, and he couldn't even speak to his own successes. He'd start gibbering
I'm
about
so
NATO on
fucking
stage.
sick of these guys lecturing fucking.
No. But this shows you. Wait, Hutch. This shows you that he's wrong, because what he just said is policy doesn't matter. It's the presentation. It's the rhetoric, and you just proved it with your this statement just proves it.
Yeah,
but
you literally kneecapped yourself.
There's never any pressure on the progressive wing of the party. Like, I would consider myself a progressive, but like they're kind of permanently outside of power within the Democratic Party. And so they have this advantage of it's like the benefit of like where we're at now. We just get to play full offense for the next 2 years until the midterms, right?
We should.
But like when they'll give you all these postmortems about why the libs lost and why the moderates lost or whatever, and then you ask them like, well, okay, like how are you going to convince someone like me that you guys should be in control of everything? And there's no responsibility there to do that. Like, I literally asked him this. I had a conversation with him, Ogre Boy, last week. I was like, what are you going to do to convince people like me that people like you should be running the show for the Democratic Party? And he was just like, Hutch, I'm a leftist. To be a leftist is to always be outside of power. And it's like, then why are you lecturing like Democrats on? I don't know. Sorry, I went on a little tangent there. I'm just so frustrated with this fucking. There's never any pressure on them to ask like, why am I losing elections? And now you have Donald Trump, who Kamala, she raised over $1 billion. She raised so much more money than Donald Trump, and he won. And so this excuse of like, well, we can't win because all these corporate PACs come in and APAC and blah 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 blah. Well, Donald Trump there's the blueprint. He he was massively outraised and he still won. So why aren't you guys asking yourselves, like, how can we connect more with voters? You know,
Yeah.
it just pisses me off. Sorry.
No, I mean,
Fuck
obviously,
yeah,
I think
based Hutch. I love it.
No, wait a minute. Ogre Boy, I'm sorry, real quick. He replies to you about how she squandered the
She
money.
squandered it.
Ogre Boy, bro, you have got to respond with how you undermined your own position.
Yeah.
Policy is all that matters. Just deliver policy. Words and rhetoric are irrelevant. And then when pointed out that Biden's objectively superior policy, which was far more populist than the alternative, failed, you appealed to rhetoric. It just admit,
and then you just kind of ignored everything,
and
then
you ignored it. And this is the problem. I don't even mind your opinions on this, but the same issue I have with you is the same issue that I have with Cenk, or at least the primary issue I had with Cenk prior to last week, which is the certitude. You are absolutely confident. Politics is so goddamn simple. All they have to do is X, Y, and Z. And you can't even pitch X, Y, and Z in a single sentence without contradicting yourself, let alone actively implementing the blueprint. Just admit that you don't know if this is going to work. And clearly we have plenty of evidence to the contrary. At least come to this with a level of humility. I'm sorry.
He told me last week that Biden should have literally threatened Joe Manchin and his daughter with prosecution. And
that's what Hassan says.
And then when I said, what do you do when Manchin says, fuck you, I'm a Republican now, Senate Majority McConnell, you don't get any judges or legislation. Ogre Boy said it would have been worth it. That's what he said. And it's like, I don't know what to say at that point. Like, but we're not dealing with serious people. We're getting one guide right now for the record.
Yeah, we're getting one guide really.
You want to let him in? I mean, like, we don't disagree. I'm fine with that. I don't have an issue with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he can come in if he wants.
But like, Ogre Boy, do you want to hop in so we can scream at you some more?
Oh man,
I was just gonna say, obviously, to be fair, I think that money in politics does make a difference, and I mean, it just strains credulity to say that money in politics doesn't make a big difference when, like, I don't think that these billionaires are parting ways with hundreds of millions of dollars for no reason. Obviously,
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter, but I'm just saying Donald Trump proved that it's possible to be massively outraised and you can still win. So,
well, he won in 16.
I don't buy this idea from progressives. Like, it's always cope from them. It's always like, well, we're never going to win because the corporate money. It's like the standard Cenk line for the last 15 years. It's like,
that's fair. I mean, and there's examples of progressives winning despite being outspent. And there's also, to be fair, examples of, probably good progressives losing because they were so. I mean, look at you could look at Cori Bush, for instance. She gets this incredible amount of AIPAC money in her district, and she ends up losing an extremely close election. Like, well, obviously, if you don't have like 10 million extra dollars spent towards your opponent, like, it probably does make a decent difference there. But
wait, Cori Bush, she lost by a fair amount, did she not?
I thought that was a pretty close primary, but maybe I'm mistaken.
She was down 16 points before AIPAC even spent a cent, though. I just don't buy that.
Again,
she was not a great politician.
I am certainly not making the claim that Cori Bush was a great politician, because that is very much not true. But she ends up losing by 7,000 votes. Like, an extra $10 million poured into your district. Like, I don't know. That seems like it would make a decent difference. Now, to be fair, she won against Lacey Clay, who did outspend her in the primary because her message just happened to resonate with people at the time. So it's not that's the only thing that matters. But that's kind of my point, though, is that one of the reasons why you say we only take individual contributions now is because we know that money doesn't matter that much, and there's a way to win without doing it. I think this just allows you a good plank. Like, for instance, for goodness sake, like Destiny back in 2016, even a guy like him, in 2016, a guy like Destiny said, I support Bernie Sanders, even though he's way further to the left than what I think, because he focuses on money in politics as a big issue. Like, I do think there's just a lot of people that are like that. And I think there's a lot of people like that with a lot of these little issues that you can add to your rhetoric and your populist rhetoric. People have been pointing out how John Ossoff is running about the corruption in the pharmaceutical industry and stuff like that, where there might be a good, a good 10,000, 50,000 people in Georgia who might say, I lean conservative, but man, I hate these fucking pharmaceutical companies. So, I'm going to vote for John Ossoff because I think he's against big moneyed interests, right? And that's been a successful campaign for him, even though he is a pretty moderate guy. So I think that that's worth pointing out, that you need that sort of anti-establishment vibe. You need some policies that you can, link to the corruption of the people above you and this kind of thing and the money in politics. And you hopefully have a good, as Ogre Boy pointed out, you need a good messenger, right? You need somebody who's actually able to deliver that message in a reasonable way. All these things matter. But But a lot of progressives are coping somewhat with the, it's all a money issue. It's like, no, I mean, it's just progressive politics just doesn't work everywhere in the country, right? Just depends on the place. So
let's see.
Mother
Ogre Boy, we sent you a DM via Twitter if you want to hop on and
You
chat.
really want to talk to this
we
guy?
already, dude. Him and me had this discussion, bro.
I
He
loved
said,
it. I loved
like,
every.
he said Biden let them split Build Back Better into two separate bills, and I was like, what do you fucking mean let them? And it's literally just to just whip the votes. Just whip the votes. If you don't have the votes, just whip the votes. Just just force Manchin to there's no I feel like people like Ogre Boy and a lot of lefties that I just really don't get along with, they don't understand the concept of a check on power. They don't understand the concept of co-equal branches of government. And sometimes, especially in a 50-50 Senate, I feel like the lesson from Biden should be wow, he was able to get so much legislation done in spite of the fact that he had to bat a perfect 1,000 in the Senate for every piece of legislation. There was a little bit more cushion in the House, but it was still a small majority. That's the lesson, is okay, we need to figure out what he did and then replicate that in the future when we have these slim margins. And his lesson is, he's just so ineffective because we didn't get the entire Build Back Better bill, which is just.
Why don't you let on a
yes,
yes, you
Pine Creek is able to
join.
I think that it's fair to really, really, really deeply criticize Joe Manchin for his complete lack of courage, let's say, with regards to passing a lot of things that would help a lot of people. But to be fair, I think that there's this idea that Joe Manchin, number one, there's this idea that, well, Joe Manchin's in a Trump plus 40 state, and there's no way he can support everything Joe Biden wants. He didn't run for re-election. So therefore, he doesn't have an excuse not to support all these things. Now, the other side of the coin is, well,
he just didn't, though.
Right. No, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Was the other side is oh, well, he just genuinely doesn't hold these beliefs. Okay, well, I mean, those are stupid beliefs then, right? Like Joe Manchin obviously coming out, there was reporting at the time where Joe Manchin said, I don't want this child benefit to be detached from work, and I don't want it to not be means tested because I'm worried poor people will use it on drugs. And it's okay, that's just a really stupid and evil opinion to have, and he deserves a lot of criticism for it. And I think that there's something to be said about if you're hitting if you've hit rock bottom, hey, there's 6 months left in this term, we really just aren't going to get Joe Manchin to do anything else. I think you probably do, at that point. I don't know if you threaten to send his daughter to jail or whatever, they're saying, but there probably is some hard politics that you can do at that point to just try and see, maybe
what?
just, hey, but how about just openly criticizing Joe Manchin for one?
He did.
Biden's oh, no, he didn't. He was.
He did. Yes, he did. Early on in 2020. Early on in 2021, he said, listen, I've got this big, bold agenda, and I got a couple senators that are blocking my shit. He made a couple statements like that, and Manchin responded by writing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying, "Fuck you, I'm not gonna basically I'm never gonna get rid of the filibuster. Stop asking." Yeah. He knew that I just don't buy this idea that there was some leverage that wasn't used. Manchin had all the leverage in the fucking world. He knew it and he used it. And
I'm not saying that it's, how do I put this? I'm not saying that what I'm describing would have necessarily worked. But I am just saying that it's worth taking a harsh stance against someone when it's you've squeezed as much as you can out of them, but they're still doing really, really fucked up things and their policies are bullshit, right? And I don't think Biden coming out and saying,
well, what does that mean though?
I think it means saying that millions of children are in poverty because of Joe Manchin, because that is true. That is
you need Joe Manchin for future bills. You need him for the judges.
No,
yes, you do. You do need him for judges.
Yes, you're talking about negotiations that were taking place in 2021. So you had a year and a half more of judges and bills.
Wait a minute. To be clear, it's true that after 2022. We did increase the Senate margin so that as long as we kept Sinema, we could lose Manchin. The problem is we lost the House, right? So in 2022,
they're not inextricably linked. The more you go after Manchin, the more you're going to paint him into a corner with Sinema. And also, there are absences. There are reasons why people aren't there. There are reasons we want to move things along quicker. And being fast is sometimes key to getting it done at all.
We have
someone new.
Yeah, I was really quick. I was just going to say, I just don't like this idea fundamentally that, we're just so scared that Joe Manchin's going to switch parties. Guys, I'm just saying the counterfactual, what did end up happening? He left the Democratic Party anyway. And
But when
he
he
didn't
did,
even run for
no, but
re-election.
that had no impact on our majority.
What?
It had no impact on legislation. When he did it, it was
Right.
inconsequential.
Wait a
And
minute.
he still
When we had the
caucused with
House, and we
Democrats.
weren't
Ogre said this during your conversation. It's infuriating. He says you need him for
no.
judges that Obama dropped the ball on in his first term because he didn't want to expend precious
I
political
don't know what the
capital.
fuck that means.
I'm gonna
There
Minecraft
are
myself if we
judicial
keep talking about
vacancies.
Ogre Boy, bro. It's
There are,
his takes are
wait a
so
minute. Let me
Bro,
fucking
Hutch
respond
hates
to him.
Ogre
Let me
Boy.
fucking respond to him. Ogre Boy,
Yes,
there
it's-
are judicial vacancies every year. I don't know where you're getting this idea from that the vacancies that Trump tried to fill and then Biden tried to fill are just leftovers from the Obama era. That's
No,
just,
he
that's-
thinks that Obama let Mitch McConnell block his judges. He's just not
number one, that's stupid because Obama had no control over that. Number two, but number two, the judicial vacancies that Biden's trying to fill now have been created in the interim. So even if he was right that Obama coughed up the ball on judicial vacancies, which he didn't, it still has nothing to do with the current situation. These vacancies exist. They have nothing to do with Obama, and we're trying to fill them in order to prevent Republicans from stacking the judiciary further. So again,
Okay, Ogre Boy, take a break.
we
Yeah.
got Pine Creek. What are your thoughts, Doug?
Well, I voted for Trump. I lean pretty far right. If you guys have questions for me, I'm willing to answer them. Well, I have one question for the panel. I put it in the live stream chat. And I think politics is very interesting. I think it's fun. I don't concentrate on it as much as you guys do because I have a real job. But I'm sure you guys do too. But I truly believe that politics is mostly about values and opinions, not about facts and evidence. Would you guys agree with that or
I
disagree?
think elections. I think we'd all agree
Largely,
that
I would
elections are. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's both, but I think values, yeah.
So I get kind of irked when I hear people say, if people only knew what I knew and studied the facts and did the research, then they would vote the way I voted. No, that's BS.
Well, no, Piker, it's because they profess a value. For example, I want to lower prices, or I want to make inflation go down, or something, or they want to say something like, illegal immigration is causing economic problems. Let's say, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but like their professed value. And what the facts are relate to the ultimate decision. So if there's a mismatch between the facts and the value, I think that is relevant to bring up facts and explain it.
Well, I agree with you. And by the way, Pisco, I've enjoyed you the most out of everybody in the panel. Not to say
we
that.
love
Whoa,
it.
whoa,
Wait,
whoa.
MAGA, rise up, MAGA.
Are you a right winger?
Whoa.
No,
He
no.
is. No, he
No.
is. Doug,
He is?
Doug, don't let him fool you.
No,
He's just
not.
shy now because you're here.
Look at my Twitter. I'm
Yeah.
shitting on Trump all the time.
Pisco, stop it. Stop fronting. Doug, you have a kindred spirit in Pisco.
He's only
I
doing that
just
because he
assumed
lives in
all
New
four of
York.
you-
I called MAGA a satanic cult this morning. So no,
Okay,
I'm
Pisco,
not.
who did you vote for?
Kamala Harris.
Okay, yeah, so you're not a right winger.
Easy. My banner is still a Kamala Harris ad. I repeat, this morning I called MAGA a satanic cult. All my tweets are about how Trump sucks dick and is corrupt.
But
Yeah,
I guess
I think what you
fine.
said, Doug, I think what you said, that the two things are linked, though. Like the fact that politics and elections are more determined by, we can just condense it and say vibes. The reason why that is the case is because the median voter is just not super plugged in. Like if you ask 60, 70% of the country specifics about this issue or that issue or that issue, a lot of these people are not going to get, they got jobs, they have careers, they have families, they go to church, they are involved, and so they just don't have the sort of time to be as super plugged in. So
yeah, I agree with that. But what I'm saying is that, let's say I could have a machine to suck all the things all four of you have in your brain and everything you know, and I now have it. We would still disagree on what policy should be done
Oh, no, we wouldn't.
because of values.
No,
Well,
we wouldn't.
let's test it. So why did you vote for Trump?
Why did I vote for Trump? I would say the number one reason was immigration. I think he's better on immigration, foreign policy, and I think the CRT/woke culture thing. I was really
On
in love with it.
immigration, what's the values-based reason that you think that Trump is better on immigration?
I would say I got so many arguments in my head that I use, and I'm
A
trying
lot
to
of them
figure
are
out what
factual, right? You're going to point to.
Well, just
number of
what's the
border
value? Like, do you
crossings
do you think
Yeah,
that,
of
like,
course, I could go that route and talk about the number of border crossings, and then you guys could say things like, "Well, how did Trump actually affect
Yeah.
that, and how did Biden affect
No,
that?"
but Doug,
and then
those
we could
are-
argue. about
those are
that.
facts though. I'm saying like
he's acknowledging that.
is the value like I just don't like immigration? Is it like I think they're
No,
bad
no.
for like
I think I'm going to say this in the most reasonable way as I can. I think there should be an orderly method of people coming into this country. And I think there should be a process of vetting that I think most people agree should happen. I think the asylum issue is like magic words. I think most people who claim asylum, if they're adjudicated, would be found not to qualify for asylum.
That's actually the case. The overwhelming
20,
majority
20,
of people that
30%.
apply are,
Yeah.
are denied. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm an immigrant to this country who's now a citizen, and I had to do a lot of work.
Where'd you come from?
Canada.
Canada.
You didn't hear the A?
Did I say?
No,
No, I'm fucking with you. No, Doug, you didn't. No.
No,
I worked hard on getting rid of my accent, but you'll probably hear a slight accent.
That's
To your point on vetting, the idea that the Biden administration was not vetting people before allowing them into the country is pure fiction. You understand that, right? I think the big issue was just the volume. And I think probably most of the people on this panel would agree that Biden was too slow to address that level of influx meaningfully. Kind of kicked it to the curb, and then at the last minute, it sort of undermined his credibility because the perception was that he just waited way too long.
Are you talking about what he did 6 months prior to the election?
Yeah, the executive order that he took after the bipartisan.
I think that was
immigration
illegal.
bill
I think it's wrong for other reasons. So I don't agree with that, Hutch, but yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
no,
I think that really hurt him, because the whole narrative that I even heard Josiah talk about was, well, the bad orange man could have told the Republicans not to sign this bill. And then what does Biden do? He issues executive orders to fix the problem.
Yeah, but you understand. Well, no, that doesn't contradict what I said. You understand the problem with executive orders is that they're number one, the most legally vulnerable. Number two, it's entirely possible that President Biden broke the law with these executive orders.
Yeah, but he didn't try. If he's willing to do it now, why wouldn't he be willing to do it before? Is the question. And there's no good answer to
right.
that.
Well,
right.
no. The question is he wanted to get caught trying, right? The idea was,
but then you're saying he's lying, and he actually thinks it's probably illegal what he's doing, and then he should be impeached or removed.
No, Pisco, because it has to be determined that he knowingly broke the law, and it has to be adjudicated in court. This is why, by the way, that Doug thinks that you're a right winger. Okay.
No, because I agree that it was weak for him to do that, because it either shows that A, he could have done it all along and he thinks it's legal, or B, he knows it's probably illegal, in which case, why are you doing knowingly illegal things? And if for years he said,
so
you need
just
to
said
have Congress.
Who said that what Biden did that Biden did something knowingly illegal? He
seemed to indicate that it was probably illegal, that he probably needed Congress,
or that it was legally dubious, and that it was the most vulnerable to judicial overturning. You know that's true. But
look at the status quo. The status quo now is crossings are way down because of this policy and other reasons as well. And okay, why didn't you do it before?
Yeah.
Because he wanted the more legally viable and strong option of congressional statute as opposed to...
You're going to wait for Congress to have bipartisan immigration reform, something we've been looking for decades? I mean, this is why I don't think there's a good answer here, and this is why I think
there is a good answer.
No.
The good answer is he did what he did because he thought, if I didn't, I wouldn't get elected.
Yeah.
Oh, that is absolutely a motivator.
I'm just saying, why didn't he try? Like, so the levels were super high in 2022. Why didn't he kick off why did he wait until the end of 2023 to start the negotiations on the bill?
Because of the election.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. I totally agree that he kicked the can down the road and it bit him in the ass. There's no question about that. My issue is Pisco seems to be of the opinion that Biden signing these executive orders, like he knows these executive orders are not just legally dubious, but that they're illegal, and he knowingly did an illegal thing. Maybe I wouldn't go that far. He knowingly did an illegal thing for electoral gain, and I don't think there's any evidence.
I'm saying that so there's really kind of a couple possibilities. One is that he thinks that this is what he's doing is completely legal, in which case, why hasn't he done it before? There's no good answer to that. Your response to that is, well, he wanted it to be less legally dubious before, but if he's willing to do it now, why wasn't he willing to do the less dubious thing before when there was just as much traction on immigration a year before?
So I want to redirect the question back to Doug, though. Like, what meaningful action would you agree, Doug, that the problem you mentioned it, the asylum laws, the way that they're written, are potential? There's potential there for that to be abused, and that was the primary reason why we saw the enormous level of influx in 2022 and 2023. Would you agree with that?
No, not entirely. Like, there's many factors. Like, for example, the remain in Mexico policy, then then you have to claim asylum from outside.
No,
the
that's
country.
not one of the motive
That
factors.
didn't
That's
stop.
30,000 immigrants. So the other factors are like humongous natural disasters, corruption, and like unrest in these countries, as well as people getting wise to the asylum processes.
The U.S. government has the ability to push anybody who crosses at a non-port of entry back over that line.
No.
Right?
Not if they're applying
subject
for
to a
asylum.
bilateral agreement with Mexico. So if Mexico
No.
doesn't wanna
Did you
have
hear what I
them,
said? At a
to push them back.
at a non-port of entry.
No. So at any if
It's illegal to cross at
so
a
there's a case
non-port
called the Thucydian. It's called Thucydian or something, in which it's an opinion written by Justice Alito. If you are found, if you're in the United States, once you're in the United States and you've crossed without inspection and admission, and you're picked up by ICE or DA or CBP,
I'm not talking about that.
So what are you talking about? If
I'm talking about they're on the Mexican side and they're about to cross. The U.S. government has the authority legally to take that immigrant and go push and just push them over and say, no, you're not crossing this line. That's completely legal.
So I'm not gonna. I don't know, but even if it's true, most of these encounters happen in America when they're across the border. Oftentimes,
Right, that's the
crossing
problem.
not in front of an
I'm not
ICE
talking
river.
that. The problem has already happened if they're already in the country. So
But that's where they find. That's where they find them.
So many people who voted for Trump voted saying that. I can even frame it in terms that I think the progressive side will understand.
Well,
Trump
Doug,
is
could you
viewed as a
clarify real
racist
quick?
and
I'm
a
sorry,
and a
could you-
xenophobe,
Doug, could
and so
you
that's a good thing.
Doug, could you just clarify real quick? Because I think the confusion is: are you under the impression that a substantial or a majority, like a substantial or majority of people are entering this country walking past Border Patrol, and Border Patrol is not pushing them out?
No, they're not doing that.
Yes, so once they're in America,
saying they
they're
should do
considered.
that.
Once they're in America, they're considered applicants for admission, and they have to get procedures. They have to go under either expedited removal or removal.
I understand, but what I think Doug is getting at, what Doug's conception of it is that Border Patrol and ICE are not pushing these people out, even
Right.
though they have the He's saying that basically undocumented migrants are crossing the border
Right.
at non-ports of entry, and Border Patrol is just standing down.
Well, I
and
thought you just
watching
said that that's
them
not
happen.
happening.
That's what all Trump voters think. They think that he literally opened the border and that they're just not enforcing the law and they're just letting people.
Well, no, just ask Doug. Doug,
that's
do
not
you-
what. That's not
so
what
Doug,
all Trump voters think.
You
Trump
agree
voters
that
want.
most of these people need to be given procedures because they're either found at a port of entry or they're found in America and they're considered applicants for admission. That's the vast majority of these people.
From my understanding, if they're even caught by a border guard, that there's like a half hour to 1 hour kind of interview between the person and the border guard, and at the border guard's discretion, they can actually do immediate deportation or not.
It's called expedited removal, and but they're still subject to expedited removal procedures. They can't summarily be pushed aside. They get to ask for review. They get a credible determination hearing of whether there's a genuine fear.
But I'm saying all that's irrelevant to.
No, it's not irrelevant because that shit takes a lot of time, and a lot of people have to be processed in that.
What I'm saying is, people who voted for Trump don't want them to even cross the line in the.
I understand that, but that's not. It's not feasible, right? This border is 1,000+ miles long, and we need more. So in order to do that, we need more resources. We need more people, monitors. We need more things, and that's what Biden tried to do. That's what Biden tried to do with legislation. So Biden can't do that with executive action. Biden cannot increase the amount of people stopping people right at the border with executive action. He needs more money. And he doesn't get more money unless he gets Congress on board.
I think you guys are getting lost in the sauce here, because Doug again Doug said there's irreducible, there's values-based reasons why I would say that immigration should be such that it is, but we haven't really heard why. Like, Doug, what is the problem with all these people coming?
I alluded to it and then we got off track, but I said I was an immigrant. So a value-based reason is like fairness. So if you guys have been to Disney World and you stood in line for 2 hours and then someone just runs up and cuts in front and doesn't have to wait at all, that's not fair. That's a value-based thing.
The legal system isn't fair. Right now we have, you can marry someone in this country and there's an automatic visa waiting for you. There's no limit on the amount of visas that you can get for immediate family relation. But if you are like trying to get employment-based visa, you have to go through all kinds of different checks and background stuff, and you need to have your employer attest that there's no competition for your job. And so the immigration system is anything but fair. There's preference categories for
and it
certain victims of crime.
It should be
so
it should be
fairness
fair
is just
but hard.
fairness is kind of begging the question. I think fairness is like people. It's the eye of the beholder of what is fair. I think the immigration system, as
That's
written,
that's
is
my
super
point about
unfair.
values. It's in the eye of the beholder. That's my point about value system voting. So if I think it's fair for someone to do what I had to do, and you don't, well, we're going to vote differently if that's our number one issue.
But I think we have agreement
let me
on some. Go ahead, sorry.
let me just ask you. So, like, if my position is that we should be loosening up the amount of work visas that we give, like if somebody is willing to come into the country, respect our laws, assimilate to a certain degree, or you know, you sort of get my point there, and they're allowed to come into the country legally and work on a seasonal basis or a semi-permanent basis, and they're contributing to the economy, they're paying into the tax pool, they're contributing to their local economies, and again, they're not committing crime. Why is that less preferable to having like a super strict immigration policy? Are your concerns cultural? Are they security? Is it about security? Is it both?
Yeah, it's if you can vet, do background checks. Like the FBI or CIA know who my parents are. When I had to cross from Canada into the United States, while I was on my student visas and work visas, I had to show my bank statements that I wouldn't, be dependent on the government for money and need welfare or food stamps or whatever. Like seriously, I had to show my bank statements that I had enough to provide for me and my wife. Is that happening on the southern border in the last 4 years?
That's what the question's getting at. It sounds like what Hutch is giving you is a bunch of potential rationales, one level of generality removed. But it sounds like what's motivating you primarily, or the first thing you brought up, is this notion of fairness. They don't have to do what I had to do. They are cutting in line. And it's not seemingly getting at a substantive part of immigration, which is the number of people coming here, whether they're displacing jobs, whether it has to do with, crime stuff. I think that, so Hutch is trying to get, I think, and Hutch, correct me if I'm wrong.
Would you acknowledge that
substantive rationale?
Can I get an acknowledgement from you guys that that's a legitimate thing?
The fairness concern is a huge concern for sure.
Right, but the cutting in line part, you acknowledge that is a legitimate thing. And so if I believe that Trump would be better,
and I'll tell you why. The reason why it's not cutting in line for these people is what Trump was doing was a little bit unfair. Trump was prioritizing for removals and adjudications people who got here in the country earlier. That was part of his policy. But in reality, what are they? If you're presenting yourself at the border for asylum, how are you cutting the line for asylum? How?
Well, number one, 70% of them are just saying that they're asylees, and they're
sure,
not.
but they're going to be
full of crap.
Yeah, but then they're going to be adjudicated and thrown out of the country.
Yeah, and how long does that take?
The people who are let in have meritorious cases.
It takes 5 to 8 years, but that's exactly what the bipartisan.
Because you need more money.
Well, hold on, but that's exactly what the bipartisan immigration bill sought to remedy.
I know, but Hutch, I get that. I understand all that, but here's the thing: you can avoid all that by just having a line at that wall and not.
Which you need more money for. Every one of your solutions. Every one of your solutions.
Every one of your solutions
requires money.
I actually crunched some numbers on this, and if you pull, let's say, people say that it has to be new money. No, you can take military personnel out of Europe and put them on the southern border.
No.
Why are we protecting European borders and not our own?
So, first of all, there are other policy reasons that now we have to go into like trade-offs between, diplomatic stuff and foreign policy.
Are you
stuff.
saying that's impossible to do?
To bring in foreign deployed people to serve as DHS people, one, I think that a lot of these people don't want to be
Guard, reserves,
DHS agents, and they're separate compartments and departments for a reason, and people choose to do military for a reason. Military is different than DHS, and so I don't view military officers interchangeable with immigration.
Military people are protecting the borders in North Korea, South Korea right now. Why can't they protect our southern border?
That's a hostile.
I'm just saying they're not interchangeable, and people who serve in the military.
Pisco,
they're not. Wait, no, because military people, number one, are usually not tasked with internal.
Do military people protect borders? True or false?
Some do, yeah, 100%. But
okay.
From external threats, what you're talking about.
Let's just take the military people who protect other people's borders and use those military people to protect our own.
Yeah, so the numbers you're talking about, how many people do you think you have deployed across the world?
I think it's 300,000, 600,000, 700,000.
So you're talking about a massive retreat from all presence in America where we project strength, where we get a bunch of there's a lot of reasons why we have bases in these different places because it's beneficial for America.
I don't think you would need all of them.
Well, how many people do you want to
See,
take
now
away
we're
from the
getting-
military?
Pisco, you understand that now we're talking about the logistics of it and not the fundamental point, right?
Yeah, but Doug,
your
money
opinion
is-
right now is
it's
that
fungible.
Your opinion, it's not a fact. Your opinion right now is it's not possible or it's not probable.
It's
not
actually so
feasible.
just be clear. There are actually laws against the military operating in certain capacities in the United States. You recognize that, yes or no?
Well, it depends what
Do
laws.
you recognize that posse comitatus is a law of the United States, is enforceable?
I can recognize that there's probably something
So
that they
so there
can't
are
do.
there are actual legal restrictions in the way that the
But
military.
you do know
can
crossing
operate.
at a non-port of
But
entry.
I just want to hear you acknowledge that, Doug. That there.
Sure,
Because you just said, right. You just said now we're just talking about numbers. But I just presented to you that there are actual legal restrictions that would restrict certain military members, National Guard excluded.
Is it
from
illegal
operating in
for
United
the
States.
military
Wait, no,
to
I just
protect
need
our
you to
border?
acknowledge that it's not
Yes,
just
yes,
numbers.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
And you
Now-
agreed that those laws are on the books and
Disco,
active.
now,
Okay.
can you acknowledge, is it illegal for our U.S. military to protect our own border?
It depends on what
You'd be
circumstances.
crazy if you said yes.
No. So if what you're talking about is to prevent invasion and invasion in the term of art as used in the posse comitatus and as described in our laws and our
Invasion be
constitution.
5 people?
No. Listen. The invasion is a term of art that applies to other countries coming over our border, not to immigration situations. But even if it were true that that's what's happening, that Mexico is
terrorists?
sending people to take over America, it would
What if they're
require
not a
us.
country but terrorists?
So just to be 100% clear, in principle, if you wanted to use the military to come and watch the border, I would just say, well, I still want those other bases. You're going to have to make a convincing reason why we should abandon our posts.
That's a value
over there.
judgment. That's a value judgment. That's not about
Doug,
facts
Doug,
and evidence.
Sure,
Right.
no.
This
But
gets back
facts.
to the main point.
The facts of the posse comitatus are still in place, and you haven't gotten over
It's
that.
irrelevant to my point
Wait, how is it irrelevant?
because I asked you, is it illegal for our U.S. military to protect our own borders?
He's saying he's
it
asking you
depends.
if it's in theory feasible, and now it's just simply a matter of legality and logistics.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree with
think
Josiah.
that
That's
we're
what
getting-
he's getting at.
Sometimes yes,
It's-
sometimes no. That is the answer to that question.
So my
Yeah, and I
question
think
is,
that sounds right,
going back to something that you all mentioned 5 minutes ago, I'm curious because I tried to Google this because I wasn't sure what the breakdown was. Pisco, given both that you're a lawyer and you deal very often with immigration, do you know what the breakdown is? Because I don't, of people who make asylum claims at ports of entry versus those who make claims at non-ports of entry?
Wait. People who make
So
asylum claims.
asylum seekers, yeah. The what is the ratio or the numbers of people who claim asylum at ports of entry versus those who cross the border at non-ports of entry and then claim asylum? Do you understand?
They're
what I'm
almost
saying?
always nowadays applying for, if they don't have a visa or another reason to be in the country, they're almost always applying for asylum, the Convention Against Torture, and withholding from removal.
Yeah, but
I don't
at,
know
at
That's not what
ports-
he's asking.
At ports of entry or non-ports of entry? Because the reason I'm asking is
I don't know.
He seems to be suggesting that if there's some sort of physical barrier, it will drastically reduce the number of asylum cases because I assume Doug believes that the vast majority of asylum seekers
Not quite true,
are-
Josiah. That's not what I'm implying.
Okay.
Thanks for the raid, Byron Talacoan. Really
What
appreciate
I'm
it.
implying is that if you had some type of barrier, let's say we lived in a pretend world where we could actually just anybody who crossed the line was zapped, like Thanos style.
Okay.
What that would do, I think, would drastically reduce the fake asylum cases. People who are truly seeking asylum and have a great case go through the port of entry. People who don't go through the port of entry.
That's
Do you-
not
wait,
true.
do you
And
have facts to support that?
Our laws. So
That-
hold on, Doug, real quick, just to specify,
Yeah.
our law, like if somebody crosses through our southern border, not at a port of entry, they are still, if they meet a certain set of criteria, they are still afforded an asylum claim.
They're
if
treated
it's
as
valid.
applicants for admission.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but I
that,
think what
but
Doug
that's
is
very
saying-
subjective, though. Like that
It's not,
changes
it's
based
not,
on
It's
No,
not
administration.
subjective. If you're in the United
not.
States and you're found and you haven't crossed without
Yeah,
border,
but there's
with inspection and approval.
discretion. What I'm saying is there is discretion by the border guards.
right,
but
but
fairness.
Wait,
is
no,
ultimately
sorry.
subjective.
No, there is not. If you are found in the United States and you have crossed the border without inspection and admission, you are considered an applicant for admission. That there's no discretion for the border guard to take that away from you or to change the law.
What about the 30-minute interview?
the credible fear determination is something that they run. Yes, the border gun runs that,
And that's
but
subjective.
they have to go through the expedited removal procedures. They cannot summarily throw all these people out of the
Right,
country.
but that interview is conducted by a real person, a real border
But they
guard.
go through, so somebody crosses illegally, right? And then they're not through a port of entry. That person then goes through the system and they're processed for that illegal entry. But if they're deemed to have a valid asylum claim, then they are allowed to stay in the country while that claim is adjudicated. That is how our asylum laws are written.
I know, but there's a law. I forget what it's the CPP rule. If you cross at a non-port of entry and claim asylum, you're presumed ineligible. There's exceptions, but
That's a Biden rule. What you're pointing to is a Biden rule.
Right.
So you know.
So what I'm saying is, if you have a legitimate asylum case, now I can't provide you like facts. Like you can't. It's so hard to get facts on what percentage of asylees are rejected. Like a lot of these things are tough to get, but you just use some common sense. You know, Republicans are the party of common sense. Just use common sense. If you had a legitimate case, why would you risk going through a non-port of entry, then be presumed to be ineligible for asylum if you had a strong case?
You assume that these people have
Doug,
like a perfect. Go ahead, Econo Boy.
Doug, it might just be substantially easier to not go through a port of entry. Like, for instance, what we see in a lot of European countries that have these controversial right-wing governments is they'll narrow and make ports of entries highly inconvenient for people to go through, basically just as a way to create additional friction so that these asylum cases don't get processed. Now, look, Democrats, and I think that many governments across the board.
Well, no, not that they won't get processed, but it'll be done at a more reasonable pace.
That's all, Doug. Don't be an idiot. That's a farce. Okay, when a right winger says you have to, instead of coming to Italy to file your asylum case, you have to go through the closest port of entry, which happens to be Libya. That's a farce. That's not.
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You got to go to the first country that will accept you.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Doug, that's a part of a policy that maybe Trump will pursue. But if we're just talking about going through the ports of entry, there's a clear logistical reason for that, because it might just be substantially more convenient to just cross the border instead of go hundreds of miles down the border to go to the nearest port of entry. Now, look, if you
did you hear what I said? That you're presumed to be ineligible for asylum if you.
So
do
first of all,
that?
these people don't watch. These people are not watching the federal rules, and
there's
they're
an
not
easy
always
question here, Doug. If all of these people went through a port of entry, would you be like, okay, it's fair, they can spend 6 years in the country and have their claims processed under the ordinary procedure?
What I would think would happen if everybody went through a port of entry, most of them would be, no, not most, a large number of them would be turned around at the port of entry because they have more resources at physical infrastructure buildings.
My understanding of even when people go to a port of entry, the overwhelming portion of those people still just end up spending several years waiting for their asylum case to be heard. Now,
of course,
forget about that because we're getting off of this is all practical stuff. Doug said that there's an idea of fairness with our immigration system, but I don't. That's much more highly subjective than the interpretation that a border agent.
You're not going to get more out of him than that, Econo Boy. I mean, we have to get into facts because it's clear.
This conversation is not about facts and evidence; it's about values, right?
No, we've been talking about facts and what the law is, what people are afforded to. All of these are facts that
that's because we're getting sidetracked.
Whether he thinks it's fair will depend on what procedures they're given, if they're cutting in line, whether they're the different rules for whether they're at the board of entry or not. Those are all facts.
No, Doug, for instance, when my family came here, this country had basically open borders. The way that I came here was I was born here on the shoulders of giants, you could say, who just came here. They just showed up and said, I'm just going to live here now. And the government said, you can just go ahead and live here now. But then we have people like you and people like other people that I know who they had to go through this complicated legal mumbo jumbo to actually come here legally. Is that fair? Like, did I do anything to earn my citizenship compared to someone who has to go?
Didn't.
Right. So that's not fair. So I could just as easily say,
yeah.
Well, why don't
and
we
you
just
understand some
have
Republicans they want to. I'm not sure where I stand on this, but you understand that this is the reasoning behind just because your parents came here illegally and you were born here doesn't automatically make you a U.S. citizen. That question's now being raised.
Yeah, but wouldn't that apply to basically all of us?
That doesn't apply. That doesn't apply to children of U.S. citizens. And there are statutes that they're not trying to get rid of, which are getting citizenship through blood. And so that's not what. No one is talking about undermining or questioning the right of people born of American citizens to be citizens. No
I
one is
never
questioning
said that, Pisco. You
Trump
gotta listen to me
No, I know,
carefully.
but that's what Econoboy is talking about. He's not
Econoboy's
talking-
example is that.
I know. I'm not
Yeah.
saying this is the case for Econoboy.
Yeah.
No, but
Well, what
Econoboy's
I'm-
saying, he's
my
saying, look
question
at you.
is-
How fair is it that someone who is like born just out of pure coincidence, born to Americans, he gets to be a citizen, but someone out has to go through this, like you, has to go through this arduous process. How is that fair?
Yeah, I would say it isn't.
So
Right,
should there
that's
be
the
some
system
sort
you
of
want.
test? So should there
In
be some
fact,
sort of test?
I would support that people have to do what I had to do, like pass a test.
Well, where would you deport people like
Well, wait a minute,
natural?
let him clarify that.
Let me finish my point.
Yeah.
So to make it more fair, I would say people would need to do what I had to do, at least take the test and study a little bit about U.S. politics and history in order to have the right to vote.
No.
Doug,
We're not talking about right
they
to
already
vote.
have
We're
to do
talking
that.
about citizenship. They're very different. Very different.
Okay.
Would you
Yeah.
Very
support,
different.
Would you support a
S-
test for 330 million Americans, which determines your citizenship?
Be done in high
eligibility?
school.
No,
I
I
think
meant no,
they-
but seriously,
they-
like
They
set
actually
aside-
kind of already have something like that, except
No, they fucking don't. They
Come
have
on, Doug.
something
No,
like that.
seriously.
no, it's a requirement in high school to take.
You are a citizen by virtue. It's called a natural born. If you're a
I'm not
natural
talking
born
about
citizen,
citizenship.
you are a citizen at the time of your birth.
Talking
People who are
about
born
both,
in this country are natural born citizens. People who are born to American citizens, provided one of their parents has like at least a residence for a little bit of time, is a citizen of the United States. And so it's not the case that this is the system we have currently. We're asking you basically, do you want to withhold citizenship from all people born here, including to other Americans, until and unless they're allowed to take a test and pass it? Okay, so then what?
No.
So then
Yeah, I wasn't
you're
talking
left
about
with what Econoboy presented you with is how is it fair that someone born to American parents just happenly
sheer
by accident
cosmic
is a
accident.
citizen?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just accident of your birth.
But
Well, right,
that's
but
unfair,
Doug,
isn't it?
the point that we're saying, well, Doug's already said that is unfair, right? But that's kind of my point is that I don't really, when I think of fairness, right? And it's always possible, like we talked about it earlier, that sometimes a Republican and a Democrat might just have irreducible values, right? But I think that intuitively, when most people say, well, what do we think? What is fairness, right? It's when there's the same standards for different groups of people. You're saying it's unfair because asylum seekers can spend several years in this country awaiting their hearing, whereas maybe you had to stay in Canada for however many months or years or whatever to get your case heard, and it's all this arduous process to go the alternative legal route, which obviously asylum seeking is a legal route to immigration, but it's different than the route that you took. But that's just kind of arbitrarily baked into our system, right? That I don't think I don't think we have a sufficiently good reason to believe that a person seeking asylum is like doing the wrong thing or the bad thing or the unfair thing.
Well, we kind of do
when-
have some data on that.
Data
Right,
on
Pisco?
that?
I think
Yeah, what do
everybody
you
here already agreed that the majority of asylum seekers are rejected.
No, but hang on a second. It's the process. They're going through the process, which
Right,
they
but
have
he's
a
not
right
talking
to
about the
do.
process. He's talking about the end result.
Wait a second. No. I thought what we were talking about was the
my.
extent to which one person has to go through one set of procedures, and how fair is it that they get to have those sets of procedures that lead to the particular outcome. So, for example, an American who is just born to other Americans, the only test they had is their parents are Americans, they're born in the United States. Whereas someone who's an outsider trying to come in through the asylum process, not only do they have way more different procedures that are more burdensome, but like you said, they might get rejected more often than someone who just is born here, right? They're by definition.
Yeah, but then they get to live here
How
for
is
5
that
to
fair?
7 years.
But then how is that
and maybe
fair
work and
is the
get
question.
free benefits and stuff.
The standard is different as between of someone who's born in the country and someone who's born outside of it. Why
Yeah,
is that fair?
But what I said it wasn't fair. What I was saying is that if you have a situation where you're comparing apples to apples, two immigrants, one just comes in, one has to do a long process.
Well, but
Well,
Doug,
you
the
guys are
long
talking about
process
someone's
is
already
totally
here.
different. For instance, we have the lottery system, which is almost an inherently unfair system, right? It's just,
arbitrary.
lottery based, right? There's the student visa program. Like, why should I get to come in the country easier just because I'm a student? What if I'm a productive worker who's already a skilled employee? Like, why are these processes different, right?
We
Like,
have a visa
Can
waiver
I ask
program.
you guys
for
a
different-
question?
and
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. On the immigration topic, you have two people at the border, and you're in charge who gets in. One person is wealthy, has $1 million in the bank account because they're a business person. Let's say they have a history of starting companies. The other person has no money, just the clothes on their back. But all else is equal. They're both healthy. They're both not criminals. They're both even family people. Who do you let in?
Yeah, you
I'd say
probably
let
make a
both of them
preference.
in.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's no.
Yeah,
We probably
No, you
yeah.
can only choose one. Who do you
Okay,
let in?
if you can only choose one, go ahead. Sorry.
And I
If you
find
choose-
progressives find this question very
No,
difficult.
it's
to
not
answer.
hard. No,
it's not hard. Like there, for instance, a lot of progressive, leftist countries or whatever,
Then answer it.
points-based immigration. I'm explaining.
The
Yeah,
investor.
so you'd
Okay,
prefer
so Pisco
like
said
these.
investor. What do you say, Conaboy?
So again, you'd prefer these sort of wealthier immigrants to non-wealthy immigrants. But again, I think that when you look at all these other countries, that's not a controversial thing. Golden visa programs exist even in this country. If you have a lot of money, it's easier to immigrate.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
I'm
Very
not saying that that's a bad thing to do or that it's a bad thing to encourage workers versus non-workers, people who might be more reliant on social benefits to immigrate versus others. But what I'm saying is that asylum seekers don't sort into one group cleanly or another. Right, you
Okay,
might
I'm
have
not talking about
asylum
asylum seekers. I'm talking about these hypothetical scenarios of who do you let in, and I thank you that both Pisco and Econoboy said you would let in the rich person and not the poor person.
Yeah,
What-
wait. I want to stop there real quick because the
Okay.
reason is that we have a rationale on who we're letting in and who we're not letting in.
I'm not worried about your
That's-
rationale
Hang on
right
a second. That's not based on just fairness, right? It's based on our intuition about who's
Yes.
going to be more productive in America.
Values.
Our intuitions about like who's going to fit in better. Those are all things that go in an immigration system. But all you gave us was fairness. That's not helpful in terms and kind of what Economy was
we
getting
don't even
at.
have to use the word fairness. I'm just asking.
That's the word
questions.
you use, and that's the value you appeal to.
So now let's change it. One's a criminal, one's not. Everything else is equal. They have the same.
You
amount
know
of
what we're
money.
going to say. We're going to let in the non-criminal.
So now, if you go down the list of all the criteria, I think most reasonable people would agree. But the point is, in real life, now taking it out of the hypothetical, in order to adjudicate all these things of what's best for our country, that takes time, resources, and work.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And when you have a border that people can cross and get away from border guards, which are record numbers in the Biden administration, the getaways. You guys disagree with that?
Record
you for
numbers
not-
of border crossings. Yes, record numbers of. Okay.
No,
yeah, sure.
record number of getaways.
You need. Wait. Hang on a second. So you're what you're going to go down to is now you're talking about facts again. And fine. Well, let's talk about facts. In order to stop those border crossings, to make the process however you want to make it, you need more money. You need more resources, or
Yes.
you need to reallocate.
Yes.
Don't you?
True or false? There's record number of getaways at the border in the last 4 years.
I don't know the particular numbers. I assume that there are because there are more border crossings.
Okay. So now so we're not talking about adjudication right now. We're talking about getaways. No contact with border guards. Okay.
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 Why are we talking about them right now?
Because that gets to those questions about you let in the rich person or the poor person, the criminal or the non-criminal.
Okay.
You can't adjudicate that. Most reasonable Americans would say that's bad. We ought to know if they're criminals. We ought to know if they're good for our country.
You seem to be alleging that the Biden administration was intentionally allowing these people into the.
No, I had said nothing about intention. I said just what has happened.
Biden and Kamala recognized that was a problem. That's why they proposed the bill to try and solve it, Doug. The problem that we're having as Democrats is that the average Democrat does not actually want open borders. That's not really true. Biden does not want open borders. Kamala does not want open borders.
So, Doug, were you in support of the bipartisan infrastructure bill or bipartisan immigration bill?
I tried to look at it. I think there was some good things in there, but I think there was also some bad things. So I don't know. I'm kind of agnostic.
Do you think if Trump
what I do know,
immigration was your number one issue, Doug, and you don't know the particulars of what's in the immigration bill, which everyone was talking about.
Why are you being like this?
Because it's frustrating because you said that this is your number one issue and you're pleading ignorance on the immigration bill, which was the central pillar
immigration
of
bill
our response.
was mostly about after people get in.
No, it fucking wasn't.
Yes.
No, it wasn't. Why are you saying you like you know? You just said you don't fucking know what's in the bill and you're pretending you know.
There were billions of dollars in that bill to make our security systems more robust, to hire more Border Patrol union agents or Border Patrol.
From my understanding, that bill would have allowed still a certain number of people to.
It was 4,000 a day across 7 days, but there's no cap currently.
And a non-port of entry, I think it should be zero.
No, it wasn't a cap currently. No. If 4,000 people total showed up at the border in a single day across 7 days, then it gave DHS the power
to summarily
to
throw people out. No procedures. That was a power that the DHS and literally the Border Patrol was asking for it. It's an awesome power to just throw someone out, no procedures.
Weren't there a lot of Democrats against that bill?
There were like 4 or 5 stated, but it was gonna pass if Trump didn't.
Why were they against that?
Because it was relatively
because it was pretty conservative.
Yeah,
it was extremely conservative.
Now, weren't there some Republicans against the bill, like even before Trump said something?
They weren't vocal about it. No, well, there were a couple actually. There were a couple.
Why were they against
it?
it?
If you go back to the era that everybody was talking about that legislation getting passed, everybody was saying that basically the Democrats were so invested in trying to get funding for Ukraine that they were willing to give the Republicans almost anything that they wanted related to that bill.
100%.
And one of the important things is why Democrats in general were against. One of the reasons that Democrats in general that were against that bill was purely because of it guts the asylum process. There are so many different ways that it raises the bar to make seeking asylum that much more difficult. That's why the people that were against it were speaking out against it. There's even the Wall Street Journal podcast when they were talking about in great detail about that bill and saying that it was the most draconian that's come across in 100 years. They spoke to how they even implemented something that they called a shout test, which said, depending on how ICE approaches immigrants, if they were to spook them in such a way that the immigrant ran, that was enough to summarily right there on the spot declare that they were not worthy of asylum whatsoever. There was a lot of shit in there that absolutely just gutted due process.
That sounds good to me, but wasn't there also
and Trump ended that outright. Done.
But wasn't there also, at least in the beginning, a Ukraine attachment to it?
They separated because so what happened was the Democrats wanted to get the foreign aid bills, and so did a bunch of Republicans, honestly. But they're like, how can you guys get foreign aid bills without funding the doing
so they
something
separated
about the border?
later.
No. The border thing wasn't even a thing until Republicans raised a stink, and they're like, we need to do something about the border. Mitch McConnell's like, fine, all these aid packages are going to be tied with a strong border bill. James Langford goes and writes it. It gets the approval of the Customs and Border Union, who's fucking hates Biden. It gets their support.
It was going to pass.
It was going to pass for sure until Trump's like, no, kill it.
Yeah, but that's a smart political move, right?
Yeah, but
it's a cynical move, and you voted for this motherfucker.
Come on, see,
so you can't possibly call it an emergency then. If it's an actual emergency, then you wouldn't make political considerations.
You also can't appeal to your values and your morals on this if what you're saying is.
See, my point is that
I think we should kick immigrants like Doug out of this goddamn country.
You know what, Econo Boy?
I have one question.
Econo Boy, you are probably the 5th or 6th person to say that. Go back to where you came from type of rhetoric.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it make you want to vote for him? Wait, does it make you want to vote for Econo Boy if he runs for office?
The party
just became a
welcome
Patreon.
the immigrants, but you only welcome the immigrants that agree with
Listen,
you, right?
if Econo Boy really
said for you, Doug, we'll
if
compromise
Econo Boy
our
really
morals.
said go back where you came from and he ran for office, he'd have your vote.
So
automatically.
why were there record numbers of border crossings in the last 4 years?
Because there were all sorts of humanitarian crises in all these different places.
Really?
In Haiti, in
After
Central
COVID,
100%. There were
COVID was highly disruptive.
COVID, there was an absolute border shut where under Title 42, where they were just pushing people out summarily under the Title 42, and because people had wisened up to the asylum, that the asylum is so packed, asylum is so that it takes so long to get everything done. They recognize that they can just come here, apply for an EAD while they're waiting for their asylum petition to be done.
You think Biden saying in the 2019 presidential Democrat primaries.
These people don't. A lot of them don't speak English. They're not following the political goings on in the parties.
Is that a fact or is that your opinion?
Doug, hold on. Wait, real quick. So what was one of the first thing that Kamala Harris did as vice president?
She opened the border.
She opened the border. No, she went to Guatemala and she announced they were going to restart a foreign aid package that Trump killed. It was a $200 million aid package. And do you remember what she said when she was down there?
Do not come.
Yeah,
she said, "Do not come." Yes.
Right. And but Hutch, do you remember what Biden said?
What did Biden say?
Just before the election in 2019, during the Democratic primaries, he said, "We want a surge to the border of immigrants."
What?
So
wait, hold on a second. What are you talking about?
You don't know this?
So
Josiah knows what I'm saying.
Let me see this quote.
Oh my God.
Right, Josiah?
Doug,
I'm familiar with the spin on this quote. Give
It's
the
a
exact
spin.
quote.
It's 100% spin.
As a homework assignment, after this is over,
What is the spin about that?
Type in Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, immigrants, and listen to the rhetoric that they used back then to talk about the need for asylum and the need for allowing people into this country. And listen to that speech and the way they talked versus the way that Trump, Harris, and Biden all talk about immigrants now. Like, don't do it now. Save
Trump
it for later.
with Biden and Harris, for Christ's sake.
I certainly will.
Well, wait a minute.
No,
we're gonna fight with Ogre Boy soon, but let's wrap this up with Doug. Doug, what was the quote about the surge thing? What can you remind me what it was?
It was, we want a surge to the border of immigrants.
Exactly.
I looked that up.
That's
I can't find shit what you're talking about here.
I would have to look it up.
Yeah. Well,
March
Doug,
16th, 2021, Biden says, "Don't leave your town." Tells migrants.
Well, and while we're contemplating this, Doug, why wouldn't you have voted for the administration that deported people at a higher rate than the guy you voted for?
You mean the Obama administration?
And the Biden administration deported more people and at a higher rate than the Trump administration.
Great question, because I think it's more efficient to not let people in so you don't have to deport them in the first place.
Okay, that would make sense for raw. That would make sense for raw numbers. I would totally understand. Listen, this person deported fewer people than this person, but he did a better job of not letting people in. That doesn't address the rate. Biden deported more people at a greater rate.
I am all for deportations of.
No, but now you're dodging.
I'm not dodging. I'm answering your question.
Right. No, you're not. Right.
Okay, ask it again. One sentence.
Why would you vote for Trump if your goal is to have as few undocumented immigrants in this country as possible and the expedited widespread removal of undocumented migrants from this country? Why didn't you vote for the administration that deported undocumented migrants at a higher rate?
That's a long run-on sentence question, but I'll answer it. Because number one, I do think Trump is viewed in the world as tougher on immigration, more xenophobic and more racist. In my opinion, that's a good thing when it comes to immigration, to protect our borders, not a bad thing. Now, you guys can disagree with that, but you probably deep inside know what I'm saying is true. If people have a choice to making a 2,000-mile trek to the United States and know that there's a high probability that this racist, xenophobic Trump is going to say, "Get out of here."
How do you explain the 2019? There was an enormous surge in border encounters in 2019.
Higher than we currently are experiencing.
It fell off of a cliff because we shut the border down.
When you say enormous surge,
at the time it was the most enormous surge that we had seen.
True or false? Was it anywhere close to the surge of 2021 and 2022?
No, but the point I'm making is that he would have had to have dealt with a very similar surge.
And he did deal with. That's where the remain in Mexico came from.
No, but
Doug,
I
think that, Doug, I think that what this fundamentally comes down to is that Trump voters obviously they just inherently want substantially less immigration. It's not really about some notion of fair. No, it's not about fairness, Doug. It wasn't fair that I was born here and I get all the amazing trappings of being an American citizen. But Trump is saying, even if you were born here, if your parents made the trek from Mexico, you shouldn't be considered an American citizen. That's an insanely unfair thing to say. We both hit the same standard. We were both born here, right? Now, fuck all that nonsense, okay? I just think that that's what this is about, is, Trump supporters want lower immigration. And I think that, I disagree with that. I think we should have,
the difference between the left and the right on this issue, I think, is the intangible, touchy-feely, compassion, humaneness. Like, if you listen to...
I agree that the left has substantially more compassion for immigrants than the right.
Yes.
I think that's a fair thing to say.
So the difference between the left and the right is that I think the right wants what's more best for our country, whereas the left wants what's more best for the immigrant. And sometimes those are misaligned.
I'm the left and you're wrong.
Doug,
last question,
if we,
please, for the love of God, please.
Really quick, no, Ogre, just 1 second. Doug, if your mindset had been established from the start of this country, America would have never been a superpower. Okay, we relied on waves of immigrants like my family from Germany, and obviously from the UK and from Italy and from Mexico and India. Like, I know that it's conservatives think it's cringe when Democrats say that diversity is our strength, but
the world changes, Econoboy. The world changes.
The world doesn't change. Immigration doesn't all of a sudden become bad because we have computers. That's not how things work. Immigration is still
not because
really,
of computers, but do you think that the wave of immigrants in the last 4 years is, let's say, the wave of immigrants we had in the 70s?
Yes. Okay, people said when Irish people came over in the early 1900s, they said that they were going to turn us into a Catholic theocracy. When Italians came over and the mob started, people said Italians were violent, swarthy people who shouldn't have been allowed into this country because they're violent and they cause crime. Okay, they said the same thing about my people, the German people, when they came over in the 1950s, especially after World War II.
Did the concept of sanctuary cities even exist in the 70s?
In before the I can't remember the bill, but we used to have significantly less regulated borders than we had today, right?
Doug,
I mean,
what's a sanctuary city?
Oh, goodness.
Denver.
No, what is tell me what a sanctuary city is. I'm an idiot. I
A
want to know what that
A city
is.
that welcomes in all the immigrants, illegal, undocumented, or otherwise,
No.
and
No.
What a sanctuary city is.
All it means is that if you're an undocumented immigrant in that city, that you have the capability to call the authorities if you see a crime or a fire or something that you need emergency services for, without the risk or fear of them looking into your documentation status as part of you calling for the cops. So to say that you're going to do away with sanctuary cities means at its core that you want people that happen to be there undocumented to not call the cops anymore to help your ass if you're getting mugged. That's what that means. When you say those things and you get that wrong, you are doing so much damage. Like that shit really pisses me off. And the other thing, and I'm going to take advantage.
I don't disagree with you there, and
okay, well that's important.
It is important, but there's other aspects as well of the sanctuary.
You've been talking for a hot minute, brother. The other reason that I joined, and this is the thing that caught my ear, you keep saying over and over again the notion that, hey, these other people are coming in and they're not doing it the hard way or the honest, good, hardworking way that I did it. You said that several times. If your dad died of some kind of illness that we now have a treatment for, are you going to look down your nose at people that get that treatment now today and say they don't deserve it because they should have struggled it out the way that my parents did?
No.
Of course not, because things get better. Certain things should become easier. There are towns in the middle of this fucking country, flyover states that us or West Coast coastal elite fucking snobs look down our noses at, that need labor and need people to revitalize those towns.
Don't disagree.
And you're saying, fuck those people. We shouldn't have a process to quickly vet and get them in here and get them to work. The level of denial and trying to give people a chance is so fucking crazy.
Wait a minute, real quick. We're gonna let Doug have the last word on this. So sure. Ogre Boy, we can spar with you, the rest of us, because Econo Boy's gonna have to go eat soon. Doug, last word to you, buddy.
Yeah, well, where to start with that? I think Ogre Boy and I agree that we don't want criminals to come into our country, and I don't think you don't even want the sick and dependent to come in our country. We want what's best for our country, right?
I don't want Canadians to come into this country, goddamn.
No, wait. No, you were supposed to have the last word.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I can't ask a question then. Sorry.
Yeah.
So
we'll have to do this again.
I'm going to assume that Ogre Boy and a lot of progressives do want what's best for our country. And what's best for our country is not to let in criminals. I'll just leave it there. Not to let in criminals. But in order to figure out if someone's a criminal or not, you have to adjudicate them. You have to do background checks. This takes time. This takes work. This takes a process. And I think we all are agreed that we want this. But when you allow people to cross that non-port of entries and give them a 30-minute questionnaire from a border guard,
you're just wrong.
We vet everybody.
We promised him the last word.
Yeah, he gets the last word.
Okay, if you think that's wrong, at least you have to give me the getaways where they're not even contacting or talking to border guards. And I think all can agree that that's bad, and we want to stop that. Now we can disagree on how to stop that, but I think, for example, I think razor wire at the border saves lives. And you might go, what? God. What a stupid thing to say, Pine Creek Doug. How can razor wire at the border save lives?
When it doesn't kill people.
Because it acts as a deterrent. It's like having one could argue that the fact that the United States is a superpower saves lives because people won't even saves American lives because people won't even dare touch the superpower of the United States.
We should implement the death penalty for speeding tickets. That would disincentivize auto fatalities, right?
True. Oh yeah, it definitely would.
Well, look,
I'm not saying that we should do it, but when you have an administration like the Biden-Harris administration, who ordered people to go into Texas, for example, and cut razor wire because it's inhumane. This is the difference between the right and left. The left will say, no, razor wire is terrible. That's not humane. But the right says, no, this acts as a great deterrent to prevent criminals from coming in this country. Even if it's only 1 out of 100. We don't want that 1 out of 100 coming across.
We disagree with you, Doug, but it's been honestly great talking to you. It's always fun to talk to people who voted for Trump to try and elucidate our views and our differences of opinion.
Well, I wish I could stay longer because I wanted to also talk about what I think the reason why you guys lost.
So listen,
next
we
week
do this
every week.
We do this every week. You are welcome to jump on in chat, and we'll spar with you about other things. But we got to deal with Ogre Boy, and then we're calling it a night. So, Doug,
good talking to you, Doug.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, buddy. And where did Pisco go?
Oh, he literally said he sent a message in private chat. He's like, I got to bounce. Love you guys. I'll continue eating dinner.
Well, I still like him.
Yeah. Give it time. Give it time, buddy. He's a prick. So, all right. Bye, Doug.
Ogre Boy, did you have any specific things for me? Otherwise,
no,
I'm gonna
fuck you. Wait a minute. No.
Oh my goodness. I'm not going to bounce.
I literally only came in because he was pissing me off.
Oh,
okay.
Doug?
That's fair.
Okay. Well, real quick. Ogre Boy. Listen, I listened to your conversation with Hutch, man, and you're killing me. You're killing me here. Are you, first off, about the judge thing? I saw the articles that you linked. I read them. The article from Politico about Obama was from 8 years ago, and I need you to understand this. Even if I grant you the premise that President Obama did not fill the number of judicial vacancies that he could have, that doesn't have fuck all to do with anything about judicial vacancies 8 years later. These vacancies routinely come up. And
that's fair.
Yeah. And so what Hutch is saying is that if you alienate Manchin and Sinema such that they either don't caucus with the Democrats anymore or switch parties, we won't be able to fill those vacancies. And I don't know where, I know you're a Hassan fan, I believe, according to your Twitter. I don't know where you stand on Brianna Joy Gray, but one of the dumbest things she ever said was that the judiciary didn't matter with regards to the 2016 election. I sincerely hope you do not have that view. I hope you recognize how important the judiciary is.
If I were to try to summarize as quick as possible in a way that I think you would understand, most of the shit that like Sam Cedar advocates for or believes, just for sake of argument, you can say that that's pretty much where I fall in line on.
Yeah. Well, okay. Then I'm not sure what's the beef.
So during our conversation, and the great source of my frustration was that I was having trouble convincing you that to lose Manchin in early 2021 would have significantly hampered Biden's, and it could have effectively ended Biden's ability to get any legislation done or any judges passed if we would have done what you were suggesting, which was to literally weaponize the DOJ, threaten Manchin with prosecution, threaten his daughter with prosecution. And at one point you said, well, it would have been worth it because, we could have like made Manchin unpopular. I got a little incredulous about that because it's difficult for me to understand how you can't see how legislation and judges are super important.
Okay, so I can agree that all of those things are important, and I think that ultimately, again, I feel like we're going to end up going in circles. My perception on like how the optics come across to the normal person is that the Democrats, by and large, are willing to hit stalemates, go, okay, we tried, and then move on. You and I might know slightly different. You might believe entirely different. But to the people at home, the ones that split ticket went Trump and AOC, they think that they're not being fought for.
So listen,
that's
I'm
a big issue.
I'm going to throw you a bone. I do agree that is the perception of millions of people in this country, that Democrats don't fight. It is a common complaint. But here's the thing. That's where someone who's educated on politics like you has to use your platform and your persuasion to say, okay, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because while Democrats could certainly take a more aggressive rhetorical posture, it also comes with enormous risks. The problem is there are a lot of people out there who think that this is my problem with the Brianna Joy Grays and the Cenk Uygurs or whatever, that politics is so simple. It's just so easy. All elected Democrats have to do is yell a lot and scream a lot. All Biden had to do was yell and scream a lot, and he would have gotten everything he wanted. That's not true. People who believe
the lack of yelling and screaming is going to do us really well in this next term. I agree. Like he went the institutionalist route and gave all the credence and due deference to letting systems play out the way they needed to. And now in Biden's second term, he's really going to show us that path really gets
but if we did it right, but if we did it your way, not only is there not a guarantee that we would have won this election, we wouldn't have had what we got under Biden. So my way is still objectively better than yours.
You're guys saying, were on debate panels not too long ago trying to say that Trump was going to be the end of democracy as we knew it.
Hang on, wait a minute.
If that's the case, and we got him anyway.
Let's deal with this. You just went for a bad faith gotcha. Like, well, Biden lost the fucking election, didn't he? You're right, he did. But if we did it your way, we'd get nothing out of Biden. At least we got something, and something is objectively greater than nothing. I win, you lose. What do you not get about that? What do you not get about that?
You win, I lose. You know who else loses is the people that are still sleeping on fucking street corners in like
you're not
essential hubs in this country.
Wait a minute. Would that have been made better if Biden got nothing in term one? You seem to think that I'm satisfied with where we are. I'm not. But I'm saying the way Biden did things in term one, working with Manchin and Sinema, is better than him alienating Manchin and Sinema. And you say, what?
2 cents tossed to the poor, yes.
Say what?
2 cents tossed to the poor, yeah.
Oh, so 2 cents tossed to the poor.
No, Hutch knows the reference.
Talking about Hassan. Hassan characterized the Biden administration by saying that, he characterized the entire Biden administration by creating a metaphor where it's like, well, if you give a homeless person 2 cents, it's like they're not going to be very grateful. I reject that premise altogether.
Yeah, I categorically reject the premise too. But you know what? Let's grant you the premise. 2 cents is still better than zero. And here's what's funny.
You say the premise.
No, 2 cents is better than zero. I agree.
Wait a minute. And here's what's funny. Sam Cedar, the guy you say that you align with politically, if he were here right now, he might be friendlier about it, but he'd actually be with me. He'd be like, damn, Josiah, you're right. And Ogre Boy, what the fuck are you talking about?
The difference being he's more willing to actually give genuine criticism towards the Democratic Party, and you guys by and large aren't.
I'm not willing. I'm not willing. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, Ogre Boy. You can't possibly be. Maybe I don't know Hutch. I don't watch Hutch's streams every day. We criticize the Democratic Party all the time on this show. Like I do it myself. We do it on our social media platforms. Like I criticize the Democratic Party arguably in much more pointed ways than even someone like Sam Cedar. Like I think that one of the issues with a lot of progressive commentators is that they kind of miss the forest for the trees on a lot of issues, and there's actually even deeper criticisms that they don't necessarily focus on as much as they should. But like this isn't Pod Save America. Like I feel like we're pretty comfortable criticizing the Democratic Party on this.
Even the Pod Boys criticize Biden.
To be fair, I'm not that familiar with you, Econoboy, so take that for what it's worth. I don't really see that out of Josiah, and for the most part, Josiah and Hutch have both basically been like, it doesn't matter what your complaints are.
That's not
Hutch specifically. No, let him. You cut a video talking about how it was super beneficial for Harris to go on tour with Cheney. And she praised Dick Cheney in front of America and said thank you for his service and what he's done for this country. And all of these things add up.
The Dick Cheney thing was so overblown. It was one throwaway line.
Prove it.
She didn't campaign with Dick Cheney. She was asked a question on the fly.
She went with his
and
daughter.
She gave an answer that
she went with his daughter on the final Blue Wall tour just before the vote. Not Bernie, not Mark Cuban, not a number of other people that would have been infinitely more popular and would have been much more of an attention getter.
To what you were saying before, though,
Republicans and lost.
To what you were saying before, though, you were talking about our perceived reticence to.
How about that right now? How about what I'm saying right now?
Hold on. Let's
talk about something in the past.
I'm trying to address something that you said a minute ago, where you talked about me and Josiah being more reluctant to criticize the Democratic Party. I have no problem criticizing the Democratic Party. What I have a problem is bad criticisms. So, for example, when you say that Biden, let Joe Manchin influence Build Back Better the way that he did, I think that's a stupid point.
We just have a descriptive disagreement. I mean, look, I think that, well, and to be fair, Ogre, obviously, one thing that I always go back to in conversations like these is, look, I think 2028, it's going to be an incredibly competitive primary. I think that these arguments will be able to be had. The ultimate testing ground will be who people vote for in the primary. I'm an AOC 2028 guy myself. I don't know who you think is the best candidate to kind of lead the Democratic Party in 2028. So we'll be able to have this conversation. I think I don't think that saying you were going to throw Joe Manchin's daughter in prison or go after her would have probably led to Manchin being very different in terms of his politics. But I don't know. I mean, that's just, who cares about that at this point? I don't think that that's really the crux of why we won or lost. I think a lot of it's just these big macro issues, like whether Kamala campaigns with Liz Cheney or not. I don't think that makes a big difference on whether she wins or loses this election. There's things she could have done to win, in my view, because it was ultimately a relatively close election. But, a lot of it comes down to these macro issues out of the control of the Democratic Party. And I think that some of the stuff that Biden did, I mean, the IRA bill alone, in my view, is an incredibly transformative piece of legislation. It's the biggest investment in climate change in history. I mean, that's a pretty good thing to do. But obviously, we might disagree in terms of the magnitude on these impacts. But anyway.
Yeah. So again, this is the frustration for me based on the stuff that you were saying in chat. Number one, the certitude about it. All these just quick, easy fixes would have guaranteed her a win. There's no evidence of that. Number two, with regards to the criticism that she embraced Liz Cheney, if you watched any of my content or even the conversations that I've had with Hutch, or even the conversation that Hutch and I had with Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball, I said that I am perfectly open to the argument that this could be alienating. And you know what? The preliminary data shows it didn't help campaigning with Liz Cheney. So it's possible that Hutch was wrong about this. It was possible that
I haven't seen any data to show that it hurt her campaign. This idea that it hurt her campaign is dubious.
Yeah, I don't know about her versus help. I know it did not help. She got less Republican support in 2024 than Biden did in 2020, than Hillary did in 2016. So the idea that I think a lot of people were pitched which is if she, deals with never Trumpers and Liz Cheney, she's going to court, moderate coded independents. There is no data to support that manifested itself in this election. But the bottom line is it was a sound strategy. Could it have been wrong in the end? Yes. And I was open to that. I think even Hutch was as well. I don't think Hutch, unless I'm mistaken, Hutch, you were not dying on the hill that fuck yeah, Liz Cheney's going to be the key to success, right?
No, I think I said if you showed me data in the polling that suggested that it was hurting her, then I would be opposed to it, obviously. But there was no data to suggest that.
So there you go. We just wanted to win, okay? And
did you win?
No, we didn't. What's your point?
Then I'm glad to see it. The thing that everyone was criticizing, the criticism that was being pushed aside, that it worked the way it needed to, I guess.
Who pushed it aside? Everyone on this panel, and even Hutch apparently, said that it was a risky strategy that may fail. What's your point? And again, this is where I go back to, what elections have you won? What elections has your side won, your faction won? Establishment Democrats actually have a better record than what you would probably consider the progressive left. So this is what I mean, where the smugness is just kind of strange to me. Like, we could be having a productive conversation. You're like, you lost, but you're a bigger loser than we are. What's your point?
This attempt at trying to frame an own, because basically people that advocate for like the broke in this country and suggest that things could be done in a better manner.
I'm not trying to own you. You're trying to own us. That's the point.
Right now in this moment, we can see that the attempts, the tactics, the strategies that you guys were advocating for prior to the election did not work. This is the one moment in time where it is the most obvious. Right after the school shooting, when this is the time where you sit there and you go, hey, maybe we should talk about gun control finally. And everybody else goes, no, don't politicize this. Don't talk about this. Shh.
He did talk about gun control after Sandy Hook.
But this is what I'm saying
about like unfair criticism. Obama did talk about gun control after Sandy Hook, bro. It was blocked by Republicans. They had control of Congress.
I'm using it as a fucking metaphor. I'm not saying like literally. That's not the point. I'm saying that this is the time to talk about how that tactic and that strategy and tacking to the right and trying to show that you can be like a Republican, but like a little gayer and a little bit more like polite about it.
Okay,
It's
we've
not the
had
thing
those
that is going to win
conversations.
the American populace's imagination on this shit.
Okay,
No
but
one's
we've
going to
had
vote
those
for a diet
conversations.
Republican.
We've had those conversations. I think that, you know, you have mainstream senators in the Democratic Party like Chris Murphy going so far as to just say like we should embrace populist rhetoric, that we should embrace the idea of getting money out of politics. I mean, Chris Murphy is not exactly a dyed-in-the-wool progressive. I think that this conversation, this sort of advocacy that you're doing is penetrating even the mainstream of the Democratic Party. But that's because there is a debate going on within Democratic circles about, you know, how the party should go forward, what strategy should the party use. I think this is all pretty healthy, and I don't really understand this. I didn't listen to most of the conversation you had with Hutch, to be fair. It just I don't know. I wasn't interested in it for one reason or another. But
don't worry about
like
it. I haven't listened
on
to it
this,
either.
yeah, I mean, like on this show though, like we spent the first hour of this very exact recording talking about ways that the Democrats should go forward and progress and try to win elections. And it seemed like we were all pretty amenable to the idea that like anti-establishment rhetoric is important. Big, bold policies is really important. Obviously, your messenger and the specific candidate that you pick is also really important. I just don't really like, it seems like you have a perceived sort of lack of humbleness on our side when, like, number one, I wouldn't consider myself an establishment Democrat. Number two,
hold on. To be completely fair, when I started talking in the chat, I just got back from the gym. So
no, that's totally fine. But
I missed the first hour. If that's what you guys are doing, that's great. That's wonderful. And I applaud it and commend it.
But we did that on our show after the election and our show after that one. Like we've been doing this for like, and I don't think like you're even on mainstream media. Like I don't think you have a shortage of open debates and like reasonable takes from mainstream people about like how I mean, certainly you're going to find some Democrats, I should say, who say, oh, you know, it was I guess Doug's not a Democrat. He's a Canadian who voted for Trump apparently. But, you know, there's people like Doug who said, oh, Democrats were too woke, that's why they lost. But we disagree with that. Like we don't actually hold that opinion. And so, you know, I don't know. I just feel like we actually agree more than you're letting on. Like we're all open to, you know, progressive populist rhetoric being the answer here. And I, in fact, just believe that to be the case. And, you know, it seems like Josiah does as well. Hutch might be the most skeptical of the four of us on the show. But I mean, like we're not taking from this election that like, oh, it's these stupid voters.
Goddamn thing.
Yeah, like I don't know, like
yeah,
like where we seem to agree, I guess. But anyway, but
it just seems to me, Ogre Boy, that folks like you your prescription is always just literally, okay, just do exactly as I say, and you'll no. Well, a little bit, yeah, but you seem to take this position of like, oh, you guys need to do exactly what I say. But I just question this idea that you're an authority to opine on winning strategy. You have an opportunity, the leftists in this country have an opportunity right now to convince people like me that you guys should be trusted with power.
You voted for her. There's no me needing to convince you to vote for Kamala. That's not it.
What do you mean?
I'm saying you guys need to vote the uninitiated, the uncommitted.
You're attacking Democrats.
And that's what I'm trying to offer.
Let me just finish my point real quick. You're attacking Democrats because they failed to persuade enough voters to win the election. So I'm turning this around on you and asking you, what is your plan to persuade enough voters, a plurality or a majority of voters in primary contests and in seats up and down the country in 2026 and in the general in 2028? What is your plan to persuade people that you guys should be in charge, that we should be doing leftist stuff? And
you keep phrasing it that way.
Neither am I. I'm not
running for office.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to convince people to vote for the Democratic candidate.
No, that's not.
I'm not in that position. I can offer, like, as we go, the same thing that you guys do, the same thing that Hassan does, the same thing that Destiny does. Anybody, you have the ability to sit there and say, "Hey, I think either what they're doing is fucking great, or I think what they're doing is kind of fucked up, and maybe they should tweak it, and maybe they should steer it in a better direction." And that's all any of us can ever do or ever offer. But the issue becomes is that when you completely shut out people's like pain and frustration for what they
Why
see.
do you say that,
turns
man?
into-
Like you don't have a monopoly on caring about people who suffer from medical bankruptcy, poverty, sickness. You think that we don't care about these things because
when
we
you
have
make
a more
excuses,
pragmatic
when you make
approach
excuses
to
and you kick
politics?
shit down the road, I'm going to make assumptions. I'm
You
sorry.
talk about excuses and but you pose these impossible situations like Biden should have forced Manchin to support every line item on his agenda. It's an unfair, completely untenable
when you act
thing
like
to suggest.
when you act like large scale events in the past happened only because everybody finally were completely amiable to voting the right way, then that's silly. Everything that has ever occurred has come from applying some kind of force. The perception is that they didn't do enough.
That.
So if you want to go and try to show all those ways, and you can argue about that all day, and that's fine, and that's great. But I'm trying to tell you that eventually they need to fucking twist arms. They need to get W's, and they need to do it in a way to win people back. That's it.
Right. So here's the confusion that I have, because again, going all the way back to when you first joined the chat, you said you took issue with this idea that the solution is populist rhetoric. You said, actually, no, it's policy. Just get populist policy. And then I said that, well, Biden was the closest thing we've had to a populist president.
But no, hold on. I already said that in the chat. At the time, you guys were talking about what to do next. And then when I said what I said about what should be done moving forward, then you're like, well, what about in the past? Well, we're not talking about that. I'm saying what to do moving forward. That was the point of what I said.
Wait a minute. Well, you also talk about what's being done in the past, because you said that Biden should have done X, Y, and Z. So you're also referencing the past too. I'm very confused by this. So my question is, if Biden had done what you suggested and twisted arms and then got nothing, no policy accomplished, even the 2 cents that you refer to, no 2 cents, how would that have helped us? How would that have helped anybody?
What you told me was that it would have made Biden look like a fighter.
To a certain extent, yes.
But you'd prefer that to like the IRA?
I would have liked to see the non-split infrastructure bill get voted on first before they ultimately allowed it to be split and voted on that way. So that in essence, it was allowed to be watered down.
I don't know what you mean when you say it was allowed to be watered down. I still don't understand what you mean.
Pelosi went forward and spent a long time with the Progressive Caucus. They were the last holdouts in order to not split that bill. And after like a multi-hour session behind closed doors, they came out dejected, but they agreed to let that bill go forward and be split. They were smart.
Because they were smart.
Because they
knew that it's better to get something than nothing.
Then maybe wait an extra couple of days and allow something to occur to get people on the fucking record when it came to certain votes.
Ogre boy.
To have something that you could point at.
But we did have that.
Inside the party, we're voting against people's best interests.
But we did have that because Manchin and Sinema were very public about their objections to Build Back Better. There was no mystery there. So there was no need for a vote.
Well, we had examples of this though, Josiah. Like Bernie, when the ARP was up for reconciliation, Bernie proposed a clean amendment on a $15 an hour minimum wage, and I think there were about 7 or 8 Democrats who voted against it. And on Ogre Boy's point, I think that on one hand you could say, and we have to wrap up soon because we are truly just going in circles at this point. We have a disagreement on what is actually effective. On one hand, you could say, hey, putting these 8 Democrats on the record, it squares in the criticism. Hey, these are the problem Democrats. And to be fair, I don't necessarily disagree. I think it's fine to put people on the record on clean bills to vote for certain things. All of us have deep criticisms for Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. We have a disagreement on who's at fault here, though, right? Because what I would say is that Biden was definitely in a rock and a hard place. The only thing that I would say is that after the IRA gets passed and you push that through, I think that Biden has carte blanche to basically do almost whatever he wants to try and get in the remaining 6 months of the unified government, anything that he can pass, despite Joe Manchin's objections, which he didn't do. But we all agree with the criticism that Biden was a little bit feckless on certain issues and didn't have as strong a rhetoric as we would necessarily want. I don't know. I mean, again, we have a disagreement descriptively on what actually would have happened if Biden had done what you said he was going to do. Bernie did try to put Democrats on the record to pressure them to vote for a $15 hour minimum wage. It didn't work. They just ultimately voted against it, right? I mean, I just.
What did that accomplish, by the way?
It didn't accomplish anything, right? Now, look, this is like the Jimmy Dore force the vote people.
If you go back to the COVID bill, the night that the cadre of Republicans that were wanting to change the threshold for where you were actually going to end up getting a check or not, Bernie said, hey, if you try to do this, I will hold this shit up and I will make this take forever if need be. And they changed their mind and they fucking backed off of it.
Yeah, and
so
I don't
sometimes it works,
I'm,
sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it can have an effect, and people listen to that and they remember when you argue on that behalf.
So you acknowledge, so you acknowledge that in a 50-50 Senate, one senator can have a shitload of leverage, right?
The Republicans backed off in that instance, and who's to say whether or not Manchin would have?
But you're saying like Bernie recognized the potential to use leverage and he used it right there successfully, right?
They didn't have to go along with what Bernie wanted, but he made the attempt. He made the play. It could have backfired on him, and it could have looked like he was the one holding up the COVID.
Ogre Boy, I think on this show we agreed that Democrats need to fight doubly
and
hard.
I'm not talking about force the vote,
right? Well, no, you're talking about something very akin to force the vote, right? That's why I use the comparison, but we agree with that. Look, we think that Democrats need to be a lot more forceful. We think that Democrats need to play a lot more hardball. I have a little bit more hope in the Democratic Party because, for instance, we can see that the Biden administration learned a lot of lessons from the Obama administration. Obama was what you're describing on steroids. Obama was very unwilling to stake out very hard fights with Republicans, did everything
until his last year. Yeah. And by then it was too late.
Exactly. No, and we totally agree on that. But when you look at when Biden took office, Biden said, look, I will not sit around for fucking 2.5 years while the Republicans just delay. I'm going to pass $1 trillion stimulus bill. I'm not going to pass a $700 billion stimulus bill like Obama did. I'm going to do $1 trillion stimulus bill, and I'm going to add $1 trillion of infrastructure spending on top of that. And I'm going to add the largest investment in climate infrastructure and climate mitigation.
Allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices.
And look, the point is that the lesson that they learned from 2016 to 2008 was you can't really work with Republicans too well. And I think, and I have hope that especially in 2028, what the Democrats will learn in response to Biden's administration is you can't really work with Republicans on most things. And caucus control is really, really important. We don't have Manchin to worry about in 2028 or 2030. Sinema's gone as well. I think that similarly to how we saw consolidation amongst House Democrats, we saw like something like 30 House Democrats voted against Obamacare in 2010. And in 2018, we see Democrats voting for things like Medicare expansion and $15 hour minimum wage back to back, no problem in the House. I think we'll see something similar in the Senate as well, where senators will probably get a little bit more stubborn on these things and actually stick together and pass big, bold bills. At least I think that will be the lesson that Democrats learn. We'll have to see, though. I mean, we obviously might have different levels of faith in the Democratic Party or Democratic Party politics.
The next 2 years is going to be a big indicator because if the Democrats, if the Democrats not being in power aren't willing to at least do the sorts of like Green New Deal, Medicare for all bills that even though they know they're not going to go anywhere, at least are making the attempt to signal to the American public and say, hey, this is what we would be doing for you if we were in power. And we're not. So that's why you need to vote us in.
Well, like, when Nancy Pelosi became the speaker, when Nancy Pelosi became the speaker in 2018, even though Donald Trump was in office and the Republicans controlled the Senate, that is exactly what you saw Nancy Pelosi do. They passed $15 hour minimum wage in the House. They passed Medicare expansion in the House. They passed, I think it was drug negotiation in the House. Like they passed a lot of these populist policies through the House, right? And I think that there's every reason to believe that after the consolidation of the Senate, when Manchin and Sinema gone, like I have a lot of reason to believe that Gallego is just going to be a much better Democrat than Kristen Sinema. And Joe Manchin's gone. We're not going to get a Democrat to replace him. But the prospect of like, kicking out Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, like it's not like the Senate's just out of reach of Democrats to win. We could definitely do that in the future. And I think that the Democrats that win those elections will, probably be a little bit more willing to pass and not be as stubborn on things like that. So
wasn't Gallego the Texas House member that was like, he's
no,
like
that's
the last...
Cuellar. That's Henry.
Okay,
Cuellar.
never mind. I was genuinely asking the question.
Yeah, Gallego's the guy who replaced Sinema in the Senate.
Gallego's a relatively progressive person, and he won in Arizona.
Okay, no, that's good. That's good.
Yeah,
Cuellar is a good guy to point to. He was the only Democrat in the entire Congress, this last Congress, that was pro-life. And if you go back to the time that Obama was sworn in 2009 with that Congress, there were like 4 dozen pro-life Democrats serving in the House. There were several pro-life Democrats serving in the Senate. So when I look at back then until now, I see what Econoboy is speaking to right now, where there's this enormous progress, in my opinion, in the right direction, in a progressive direction. And I guess I wish that from people like you, Ogre Boy, I wish that there would be more recognition of that progress rather than constantly focusing on what we have not accomplished yet. That's my frustration.
Or some sort of combination thereof.
I will meet you halfway, and I will at least say this. Like, I'm not sitting here trying to say that I'm absolutely right on everything and that I know everything. That's not it. I have an understanding of a certain stretch of time. To the extent that I may be wrong, hey, it is what it is, and I'm not ever done with trying to look into shit or read about shit or whatever. I will say, I'm not saying that at any given point, like, oh, they haven't gotten better or they haven't done this, that, or the other. But if I have this notion that over the stretch of 20 years that we're only just now starting to put out like fires that the Democratic Party's lack of strategy, lack of tactics, a willingness to capitulate, things of that nature, that if they're only just now closing the loop and that's what I'm supposed to be giving them a high five for, I'm not going to be in that mindset to do that.
But like what?
Like I've tried to say, okay, and if you're trying to tell me that, like, well, no, the judges from like 12 years ago or whatever doesn't mean anything about judges now, fine, like, be that as it may. But I'm trying to, and this isn't something that I'm just going to pull out of my ass in the moment, right? These are things and observations from, again, 20 years worth of shit. The idea isn't to find one thing and then now you guys like drill down on that and we have this run another 20 minutes.
Wait, okay, but would you
I'm talking about in general. If I think that it's something that started in the Obama era, that it continued through Biden, and now like we were locked into a situation where we had to do a certain thing in order to fix a problem because there was no other option. It's like, I'm not going to give him a high five for finally closing the loop on something that started under Obama's era. That's it.
Wait, why not?
These things take a lot of time to build out.
Because
obviously,
who was his vice president, man?
The MAGA movement, for instance, is literally almost a decade old at this point. It was only up until right now when we see the level of consolidation and power grabs that Trump was able to take on. Again, it's been a decade at this point, right? So sometimes some of these things take a while. I would just point to that I think Democrats are learning these lessons. We can look at even like state level Democrats, right?
Okay,
Democratic states.
Have you ever heard of anybody talk about like Pied Piper strategy and how Hillary had a hand in trying to nurture Trump through the?
I was never actually.
I'm not a fan of Hillary. I don't any criticism of the.
That's not my point, though. She was the candidate at one point.
You're referencing an email where that came up as a possible strategy. There's no evidence they actually did it. And if we're looking at Pied Piper strategies, they did that across the country in 2022, and it paid the fuck off.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it worked.
Obviously, boosting candidates of a lower quality of the other party is probably, all else equal, it's probably advantageous to your political movement. But forget about that. Let's just ignore that. My only point is that, when you look at Democrats today and you look at Democratic states, like states that are controlled entirely by Democrats, we just see them passing a lot of these populist things. Like, it turns out when the Republicans are out of the way and you elect enough Democrats, they do just do the things that we want them to do, right? And I know that it's a very frustrating thing. Like, what you have to do is just elect more Democrats, right? But I don't know, man. Like when Michigan, well, yeah, but Ogre Boy, that's a sound strategy. Literally. Like, for instance, like when Virginia goes from having Republicans control one chamber of the legislature by one seat, all the way to now the Democrats control that legislature by one seat. They're all of a sudden able to pass all these things. You saw the same exact thing happen in Minnesota, happen in Michigan, when that one seat flips and Democrats all of a sudden control these chambers, and now the Republicans don't control these chambers. What ends up happening? The Democrats pass all of these great things. And again, like, look at even when Biden was in office, when we go from really quick.
That's true and fair. But when you're talking about the state level, you end up with people that are a little bit more altruistic in their approach than when you get to the federal level.
Ogre Boy,
again, saying that even at the federal level.
Let's just ignore that for a second. Let's ignore the state level examples for a second. Let's just say that instead of, I don't know, let's say that instead of Raphael Warnock winning his seat, it was Kelly Loeffler who won that seat. Do we think any of the things that Biden passed would have been passed? I mean, the answer is no, obviously, right? And so it's clear that just having that one extra Democrat, that marginal Democrat, makes a huge difference. And what Republicans will find out is that having 53 senators instead of 51 senators makes all the difference in the world, because now the annoying Manchin-style Republicans like Collins and Murkowski, they all of a sudden don't matter anymore.
They're
We can just pass
surplus to
whatever the fuck we
requirements.
want. Yeah, exactly.
They're surplus to
right.
requirements.
Except for when some of those Democrats are like, if you carbon copied like 5 more John Fettermans that are basically standing in the way of anything that's related to like a college climate or anything like that, right? Or
I think
when it
to
comes to certain
point,
examples of like defense spending.
But I think to Econoboy's point is that sometimes someone like Fetterman, even if you don't like him, you like that he's a blue senator.
I don't even think that Fetterman is against the IRA. Like, I don't think, he wasn't in the Senate at the time, obviously, but it's very much not clear to me that Fetterman is like another Manchin, because he voted for.
He's
all
heading
the
in that direction.
Nominees.
You
could make that argument, but like, look, I understand that Fetterman turned out to be a huge disappointment because he was a progressive and he turned into this like the weird centrist guy. But it's the only point that I'm making, which you appear to have agreed with, is that your marginal Democrats make huge differences in the total amount of things that you're able to pass. And look, if we can agree on that, then we can agree on the fundamental strategy, which is primary these crazy centrist Democrats like Cuellar, get them out of the way. Nobody likes Cuellar in this podcast, and vote for Democrats as much as you can, because the more Democrats that you vote in, the more likely you're going to be able to pass crazy good shit.
Would Bloomberg try to do the same thing that Biden did?
I'm not advocating for voting for Bloomberg in the primary. I would never.
But he would have been a Democrat had he gotten through the primary. So
it would have been better.
Bloomberg
But it would have been better than but it would have been better than Trump. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying there's. It's not that there's not. We're literally agreeing with you. It's not that Democratic quality doesn't matter. Not all Democrats are made the same. But what I'm saying is that if we had, let's say, 52 Democratic senators in the Senate, 220, 225 members of the Democratic House, and Michael Bloomberg as president.
Like, you can't say that the caliber doesn't matter as long as the numbers are there. But
I didn't say the caliber doesn't matter. I said the
but
opposite.
Like, that's okay.
I just said the caliber does matter, right? I'm not okay, Ogre Boy. I'm not saying Biden was my first choice to be. I voted for Bernie in the primary. Okay. I'm not saying that Biden was my first choice. I'm just saying that it's reasonable to recognize that Biden obviously is substantially better than Trump, and not substantially better in a way that's like, oh, he's just not doing what Trump would have done. He's doing positively good things while he's in office, right? And I think that it's just important to not get so dissuaded, because you see people like Brianna Joy Gray, obviously, and you haven't said how you feel about her, but like, you'll see people that say that, you'll see like some people who like give up on Democratic Party politics and say we need to go to the Green Party, which is a terrible strategy, or we just shouldn't vote and we should just do mutual aid. Like, this is ridiculous. This is pie in the sky stuff. Like, that's much more pie in the sky than the idea that voting for a Democrat results in positive outcomes.
Ogre Boy gave it away there with what he was saying. I think the fundamental disagreement is, like, even with the Bloomberg example, had Bloomberg won the primary, I would have been very disappointed. But would I still have voted for him over Trump and advocated for voting for him over Trump? Yes. Fuck yes. And that's really the crux of the disagreement here. Like, there are obviously there are very specific lesser disagreements, but if it can be distilled in one major schism, based on your facial expression when I said that, you seem to recognize no difference between Bloomberg and Trump. And I do.
At that point, it's just the different color of the Make America Great Again hat.
No. But whatever. We are going around.
Yeah, we're going in circles. Let's end this. Guys, I'm hungry as shit. I've been held hostage here. Yeah.
Good talking to you, Ogre Boy. Thanks for coming on.
I think Hutch is going to unblock you.
I'll unblock you. What's your name on Twitter again? Is it Ogre Boy 6?
Ogre Boy 6 on all social media.
Good. That way he can stop blasting me when he's trying to blast you. Thank God.
All right, let's build this bridge. Let's build this.